Great.
I got it. Faster, Jane.
I think you have to have fewer than 2 slides in order to stay in spot.
Next year.
Sorry.
Next year. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is a special work session, and we are here for our department budget presentations. So we have our department directors who are going to be presenting this evening, but we're going to have our city manager kick us off, Heather Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I will keep my introduction very brief because I know what you want to hear about tonight is the departments and some more detail on the different types of activities, and so we'll go right into that. Before we do that, I want to talk about the budget process. As you all know, this is the fifth meeting, actually, that we've had on the budget already. And you have a couple more deep dives coming up after this in November with the adoption on November 10th, which is a Monday when we go over the general fund, and November 25th, which will be the capital projects and the enterprise funds. And then December 2nd is the date at which you're scheduled to consider and adopt the tax levies, both for the EDA as well as for the general property tax levy. So that's the process. You note, at every council meeting, the public is welcome to come in and comment during the process. All of the information that you're going to see tonight is information that's available in our bi-monthly and annual monitoring reports. What we've tried to do is we've tried to include a lot of that monitoring information in the document that you're going to get, the budget document that you'll get on November 1st, which is we'll have the budget information as well as a lot of the information that you see on a regular basis. When the departments will go through one by one, we've mixed up the presentation. We didn't just go alphabetically this year. We're trying to start with some of the larger departments and go through their budgets. And they're going to talk about what they do, the kind of staffing, so where their budget's allocated in terms of staffing. One thing that's new this year is we're going to try and have everyone talk a little bit about the budget pressures that are specific to their departments, but also talk about some of the efficiencies that they've undertaken over the years. As you all know, we've started in June talking about a 4.7% levy increase. You certified a maximum of 4.4%. We continue to work to get that down. We're closer to 4% now, and we're going to keep working on it up till the very last minute that we bring the information to you in December. As a part of that process, you'll hear some of the things that we've done over the years, some of the things that we have in the works in terms of making sure that we are providing the most efficient and effective services for the residents of the city of Burnsville and the businesses as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, Steve Albrecht. You can see here is the list of all of our presenters tonight. I won't read through them as you'll meet them individually as we go through. But unless there are any questions, I will, with no further ado, turn it over to our Public Works Director, Mr. Albrecht.
Now, I just want to make a comment, and that is I'm glad to hear you say that tonight our department heads are going to be talking about the pressures that they're going to be experiencing, and also to highlight that we're going to be hearing about the efficiencies. And what our citizens will also hear, and I like what you also said, is that we will be looking at the deliverables when they see the budget, the full budget presentation. So to our listening public, what we do is we measure the deliverables that we direct staff from the council to deliver for this year. So they will hear that, so they can see the direct cost to delivering those services. And I like that because now the public knows a direct correlation between what they're paying in taxes and what it means. But then there are always pressures that's going to impact us, just like we've experienced this year.
Madam Mayor, as you articulated, I mean, you set the direction by establishing the ends and outcomes. That's our ruling document, so that's how we provide our services. And the other thing that we hope that you'll get a sense of tonight is that finding more efficient ways and trying new things is a way of doing business here. Some of the things you'll hear about tonight are things that were underway a few years ago. Some of the things are just underway now, and some of the things are things that we're contemplating in the future. But it's really a culture that we have here at the City of Burnsville to try and really make sure that we're doing things in the most efficient manner, and to also try to see if there's a way that we can do things differently, and we learn from that. Sometimes it doesn't work out, like you heard about the snow plowing at one point, sidewalk snow plowing. But that being said, a lot of times they really do, and I'm going to not steal the thunder of all of the great department directors we have here, because they have some really great things to talk about tonight. So.
I'm glad that we're not afraid to try something and then say it doesn't work and then do something else. Steve Albrecht, our Public Works Director.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm here tonight to present the Public Works and Engineering portion of the presentation. Before I get into it, Terry Schultz is going to follow me. Our departments work not that all the departments don't work very closely together, but on the maintenance side of things, our departments really are almost one department when we talk maintenance. When we talk Terry's the park maintenance, the forestry department, natural resource, they work hand in hand with our street and our utilities departments. And so just want to make that understood, even though we're going to give separate presentations, there's a great deal of overlap in those divisions, as there are with other divisions too. So just going through that. Our division is made up of several parts, the first of which is engineering that we'll talk about in a second. We have the streets division. We have the utility enterprise funds. The largest division involved in that is our water and sewer division. The other utility funds, the stormwater, that's actually overseen by the street division, in part with natural resources and engineering. So there's 3 different departments involved in that. Street lighting would be our street division again, and then sidewalk snow plowing is our street division, and then last but not least is our fleet division, which also does some facilities work too. So if we talk about our engineering division, they're not a separate division. They work very closely with community development and other divisions, but they really provide the technical support for all of our maintenance divisions, and they oversee and plan for all of our projects. That division does the infrastructure planning and evaluation for the city. Construction and reconstruction are their specialties. The biggest challenge that I'll kind of emphasize when we talk budget pressures for public works is the age of our infrastructure. The city of Burnsville, 60% of our infrastructure pre-1980 originally. Now we're slowly catching up with that, but that's a significant amount. And just to give people in the audience an idea, when we're talking infrastructure, the city of Burnsville has in excess of $500 million of streets, sewer, water, facilities, parks, all of those things that we own. If you added all that up, it's a significant amount of value. And so that's why when we talk about catching up, it's not something you can just catch up with in 1 year. And so when we talk about that, engineering's job is to help program and plan for that. Moving forward in 2015, you're going to see a CIP that's in the $26 million range, which is a significant CIP for the city of Burnsville. That includes some big projects that we'll talk about related to sanitary sewer, stormwater, reconstruction of streets, Nicollet, and Burnsville Parkway. So there's a significant amount of investment that this department is charged with overseeing. And then as part of that, they are responsible for the funding of much of that. Special assessments, like many cities, we use special assessments for a resident portion of our reconstruction projects and our rehabilitation projects. Our ITF covers the city portion or the general taxpayer portion of those costs. And we've talked about this many times, but it's important for our taxpayers to know our council had foresight many years ago to start the ITF fund, which allows the city to fund 60% of those assessed improvements as a pay-go, not to have to issue debt and pay interest on that, but to actually do pay-go, which is very important because that's more dollars going to the infrastructure versus spending it on interest. The engineering department also does development review. They handle all the traffic issues and the right-of-way management. As I go through this, I want to touch on some of the efficiencies and things that we do while we're on the subject. And engineering uses a great deal of consultants. And sometimes people say, well, why do you hire consultants? We use consultants for a couple of reasons. Number one, to manage our peak loads. In order to do the amount of work we do, we'd have to have numerous additional staff. That doesn't make a lot of sense to staff up for peak seasons and then staff down. So we use a dozen plus consultants during the year throughout the Public Works Division to supplement our staff. The other part is expertise. we couldn't afford to have people who are experts in every area of engineering, and so we use those consultants to provide that expertise. Over the last 2 years, we've used consultants to do the development reviews for us. That's worked out very well with the Community Development Department, and what that allows us to do, that's a pass-through cost to the developers. And instead of the city having on-staff people that when there's no development going on, we're not necessarily utilizing that, we have consultants that are ready to help us out as needed. And so that helps cut our bottom line for the taxpayers. And so that's important. The engineering department also gets involved with many of the joint powers agreements that I'll talk about throughout this. And when we talk joint powers agreements, those are how we partner with other counties and other cities to do things together at a much more affordable way. So moving on to our next division, that would be our street division. They're primarily charged with maintaining on a daily basis our 221 miles of street. Now that's down from last year, and the reason that's down, one of the budget efficiencies is we got rid of about 4 miles of street that was very problematic. Black Dog Road has been turned back to Xcel Energy, and so the money that we were spending annually and the future millions of dollars we would have to spend are no longer an obligation to the city of Burnsville. So that was an opportunity where the city worked with Xcel on something that made sense, and we were able to get rid of the maintenance of that road. We're still going to have access to that area, as you're aware of, as Terry Schultz is working on a very scenic trail system through there, but the day-to-day maintenance that our taxpayers weren't aware that they were funding, we will no longer have that obligation, so that's important. We're also in charge of asphalt repair, street signs, street and traffic light maintenance, street lights. We've got about 2,800 street lights in town that we're in charge of, 67 traffic signals, so a significant amount of both of those items that our street department takes care of. And the way they're able to do this is, again, we partner. Dakota County is our partner on traffic signals. We actually work through the county. They do much of our traffic engineering for us and do maintenance on those signals through a joint powers agreement with them. We use consultants then to be our in-house. We have one in-house person who's actually retiring tomorrow, which is a little bit sad, who's our specialist. We'll try to find a replacement for her, but we use consultants for that expertise that we need on traffic issues with that. And so there's a lot, again, of use of outside forces in the city. And then when we talk about sidewalk maintenance, we'll talk about sidewalk snow plowing. That's contracted out. The city does now do some supplemental plowing to keep that level of service. But when you think about sidewalk snow plowing, which is overseen by the street department, if we were to do that internally, that'd be 4 additional employees for the city, because that's what the contractor uses to meet our level of service, plus 4 pieces of equipment. So you think about it in that. By using a contractor, we're able to reduce both staff size and the amount of equipment that the city maintains. So I think there's a significant value to the residents. When we look at our storm drainage system that Streets oversees, that's 288 ponds, 8 stormwater lift stations. It's something that goes unseen, which is a good thing, because when we have problems with the stormwater system, that means we've got flooded homes, flooded basements. We had one of the wettest springs we've ever had, and the city of Burnsville did very well. It's been a long time, since the 80s. Burnsville has been working diligently on flood issues, and we're able to come through pretty unscathed this spring, which was remarkable compared to a lot of our neighboring cities. We jump to utilities, our next large division. The utility division is both in charge of water and sewer. We'll just touch on our water system real briefly. 260 plus miles of water main, a significant amount of water production facilities. And the big thing to understand is this department pumps and treats 3.3 plus billion gallons of water a year. And on any given day, that could be 6 million gallons a day to over 20 million gallons a day. And what that means is, their job isn't just turn on the switch and let it go, because on a day when you're pumping 6 million gallons, you have a lot different issues and challenges than on that day where you have 20 million gallons. Water quality issues, complaints, wintertime, frozen water services, things like that, where our staff has had to get very involved. And so with that, you'll also see we've got the 17,000 customers hooked up to the system. As we embark on our water meter replacement program this next year, that'll be impacting and working on the revenues there. When we talk about JPAs and partnerships, obviously the biggest one in our water system would be the partnership with Savage. That partnership has had some significant environmental benefits. It was renewed for 5 years this year. The city of Burnsville provides 80% of the potable water that Savage uses. Savage has increased that from 30 to 40% in the first years to up to 80%, and that's about the maximum that they can still keep their system running baseline and take water from us. So we're really proud of that. I think it's a good reflection on our staff that Savage signed that additional 5 years without any question. So that means that they believe the water quality they're getting from Burnsville is as good as anything they can pump, and so that's important to us. And then also continuing on with sanitary sewer, we have a significant amount of sanitary sewer. We use contractors to clean our sanitary sewers and to monitor those. Our staff monitors the lift stations, but a lot of the cleaning and work like that is actually shipped out to contractors, which again, that's kind of a summertime thing. We bring that staff into the summer to help, and then when the work is done, they're gone for the year. So that's part of that. Jumping to our fleet department. Last but not least, our fleet department takes care of the 300-plus vehicles and pieces of equipment that the city of Burnsville has. And it's significant in a couple of ways. We have one of the few fleets for a city our size that has emergency vehicle trained staff that are certified. And what that means to Burnsville is the majority of the repairs and setups done with our police and fire vehicles are done in-house. We don't have to send ours out to very expensive contractors to have work done on them. And the other reason that's important is when you send a truck or a vehicle out, you've got to have another one on standby to replace that. We're able to keep our vehicles in-house the majority of the time. It allows us to run our fleet a little bit smaller, a little bit leaner than some of our other departments neighboring-wise, and so that's an important thing. It also provides the maximum flexibility to our emergency staff, and so that's an important thing. We have a very good relationship with our police and fire staff on setting those vehicles up and keeping them maintained, and that's something we're very proud of. And one of the biggest savings that we'll touch on in a second that you're going to see moving forward this year is the joint powers agreement executed between Burnsville, Scott County, and Carver County for fleet services. And that fleet services JPA is taking our 1980s technology in our fleet system and upgrading it to 2014, and is going to allow us to run our fleet much more efficiently, and I'll talk about that in a second. So just summarizing for the council, as you look at our budget this year, budget pressure-wise, our single biggest driver is our infrastructure age. Burnsville, as we've looked at some of those long-term plans, we've got another 10-plus years of kind of going through this bubble peak before we start to come out the other side and start to make some progress down. But we are holding our own in several areas, and so we'll continue to work diligently for that 10-year period. But it's important for our public to understand we are headed through that peak. We don't want to ramp up spending to get to the top of the peak quicker, because then when we come down the other side, we've probably overspent and overinvested in something that we just need to get through. And so that's number one. Price inflation. Now, one that I didn't have noted on here that's actually changed, that's driving things, is our contract costs. If you look at 2014, the projects that we bid early in 2014 were still at or below prices we'd seen previously. The projects that have been bid later this year, significantly higher. And we don't sense that that trend is necessarily going to change. What we will do to try to mitigate that is look at the timing of our bidding, trying to be one of the first cities out with bids. And so that's something you'll see us doing, is bringing a lot of stuff to you early next year before contractors are filled up with their workloads for 2015. And that's important. The cities things that get out the latest pay the highest prices when you're trying to get them done. And so we will continue to do that. Our material costs are continuing to rise. Salt is a notable one that you'll see in the budget. Last winter was a tough winter, and we had to use the majority of the salt reserve. We keep about 800 tons of salt on hand as a reserve supply, and last winter pretty much took all of that reserve and was used. And so over the next year and a half, through the end of this year's budget, next year's, we'll actually be replenishing that standby reserve. And so we do have some increases in the winter maintenance that you'll see when you see the budget numbers. They're related to getting us back up to where we should be from our salt reserves. A couple of hard winters in a row, we just don't have any salt left at this point. So. And then weather, obviously snow and ice I was just touching on. That's a big driver for us. Precipitation in the spring. Precipitation has that counter effect when you look at our water and sewer utility. A wet year, the water pumping's down. We have less revenues from the water utility, and to a certain extent the water utility, that's tough on it because it costs us a certain amount to deliver water no matter what the precipitation is. And so that's something that we have to monitor. Our last couple of years you have the wet spring, so we have pumping down, but then through the end of the year pumping tends to catch up, at least this year also. Environmental regulatory trends, we're talking about emissions controls, things like that on generators where we have to replace generators or do different things with our trucks and vehicles. And then the last one I want to touch on, seasonal staff has been a little bit of an issue for us the last couple of years. And the reason we mention that is it was getting harder and harder for Burnsville. We use a significant amount of seasonal staff in the Parks and Natural Resource Department and in the Public Works Department. And they're great because we bring them in the summertime, and then they're gone at the end of the summer. They help us meet that peak load. If you want to look at glass half full on minimum wage increases, one of the positives is that will actually allow Burnsville to be a little more competitive moving forward on summer staffing. We were not able to compete. We had cities around us raising their summer wages beyond what we could pay. We do believe minimum wage will actually at least put us on fair ground with them, and we'll start retaining some of that seasonal staff that had been chasing dollars necessarily, not staying with us for training. So I know the minimum wage does have a big budget implication. One of the positives of it on the seasonal staffing is it will help us out a little bit.
Okay. Councilmember Sherry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steve, I have a question on infrastructure age.
Yeah.
I think that there's kind of a perception among some out in the public that we're surprised when things are failing. And I'm not, because I've been around for a while, but perhaps you can explain how you decide when you replace big items, and even when you do, whether it be a big piece of capital equipment, for some reason the the generator and the water
treatment plant, the filters
treatment
and
plant.
stuff that we're doing.
I mean, I guess I know that what you tend to do is squeeze every ounce of life out of this, and so it's not a surprise to us. But could you talk a little bit more about how you do that?
Our infrastructure system, that $500 million of stuff we talked about, we have a 15-year plan for everything we have in this city. So we know what our costs are going to be over the next 15 years. And we could go longer than that if we wanted to. We could.
Right.
And so we have, for example, our pavement. Every year we inventory a third of our pavement and keep adjusting that 15-year plan to try to keep up with the conditions. As you said, by monitoring, and we do a similar thing with all of our infrastructure, a very similar approach. And our goal is to extend its life to its maximum. People often wonder, well, why do you let the street crumble? Well, we want to get the useful life out of everything we have. And as long as it's not a safety issue or a quality of life issue, we think that we want to extend that life. And so we do a great deal of planning. And then we also do a great deal of planning and discussion with the council long range on how we want to fund those things long range. Many things on the street side are pay-go. There are other things on the water and sewer side that are such large expenses at one time, it's difficult to be pay-go. So we do some planned bonding where we plan to bond for those. We have the debt service and all of those things are planned out. And so when people say, oh, it surprised you, it didn't surprise us. We are monitoring our water treatment plant, for example, built in the mid-'70s. We constantly monitor it to see at what point are we going to have to replace it to be ahead of the curve, but let's keep extending it as long as we can. Understanding that treatment plant handles 3.3 billion gallons of water a year, it's important. We can't obviously let it go to the very end, but we need to extend its life. And so we've been planning that project. It's not new on the council's radar. Some of these projects, though, until they come to year 1 or 2 out on the capital improvement program, that's when they start showing up in the paper and people start hearing about them. And so we want to assure people we have lots of plans that show a lot of long-term planning, and we've made calculated decisions on how we're going to fund. And the council is involved in that annual with your capital improvement program. And I think, I'd love to talk all night about Public Works, but probably the city manager's going right now. But anyway, when we do our capital improvement program, we only have time to really highlight years 1 and 2. There are 5 years in the plan, and there's another 10 years back in the offices that nobody ever gets to see. So I think it's important to make sure the public understands that these aren't surprises. These are calculated decisions on how we fund things.
And thank you for explaining it that way. I think that that we all understand that, but I want to be sure that the public as a whole understands that. Thank you.
And I'm so pleased that you raised that issue, because in the paper when we had the tour and we went to the water treatment plant, and they were surprised, some of them, that we knew about these things, but we are taking a tour to really understand what's going on in our facilities. But we're aware of all of that because we have a capital improvement plan. It's 5 years. But we also know that the pavement management plan is a lot longer than that. And we also understand the age of all of our facilities in the city. And people don't realize that we pay attention to that $500 million asset. That's just in public works when we look at all of that stuff. Mary?
Well, I think that the real surprise was that that stuff was still running. It's older than you are, Steve.
Yes. Not quite, of course. I wish it was, but not quite. Close.
Yeah, the Bill just said the generator is 37.
Yeah, well, I thank you. I'll think that's a compliment. Well, I'll finish up quickly because I'm going to be in trouble with everybody else here for taking up all their time. But budget efficiencies, we touched on the JPA for fleet software. We're moving that forward with Scott County and Carver County. That's going to have both a significant capital savings to us up front and then an annual savings to the city from here on out. It's going to allow us to run our fleet, efficient number of vehicles, right-size that fleet, and make sure we're managing it properly. So there's going to be a lot of savings associated with that. That's the new fleet management system that I talk about. We'll continue to use those consultants and contractors. For example, this week we just paved Cedar Bridge. Our staff did 50% of the work, the milling and the patching, and we hired a paving contractor to come in right behind them. So they work hand in hand a lot of times with contractors to do the things we're not good at necessarily. Proposed meter reading system, that'll be a big one next year. That's going to allow the city to recapture lost revenues that we estimate in the $250,000, $300,000 a year. So that's a big recapture, and that helps us keep rates down to everyone else when we're not allowing water to go out the door. And then we touched on the Black Dog Road turnback, which is an important thing to the city long term. Every spring, there's a $50,000 bill essentially from repairing that roadway, and so that's something the city will no longer have to deal with. So with that, I would take any questions the council has, and again, Terry Schultz is next. So
Steve, so you talked about the air.
yeah, sorry.
This is good for our because we know from our monitoring report how many people you have on staff, and that helps them to understand.
Yep, we have 46 full-time employees, as I mentioned. Not as much seasonal staff as the Parks and Natural Resource Department has, but another dozen or so seasonal employees that come to work for us at different peak times of the season. And the other thing I want to touch on, too, is I think there's a misperception that sometimes in the winter, the water department or other departments don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
When we talk about plowing and snow maintenance, every maintenance worker we have in this city participates in snow plowing. Every one of them. Doesn't matter what division they're in. So in the winter, they are all on call for snow duty in addition to any duties in their area. So I think that's an important thing, too. And then we'll end with just the budget overview. I think you're aware of these slides, but in general, our street and engineering fund, all that money is going into basically capital projects and repairing stuff. Our personnel costs are extremely low in those funds. When you get over to the water and sewer and stormwater, those are a utility. We're essentially a business in those areas, and so there are higher overhead costs due to the fact that you're basically running a business when you're providing water and sewer to the public and the stormwater fund. And so that's what you see reflected in those two graphs for budget
I
percentages.
think your department is probably the only department that produces a product and provides a service.
And our department, that also includes some finance people, too. We have a utility billing staff that's a vital part of that business,
It's all
and our
part of the
finance
service
operations.
in your backroom
Yep.
operations, but your product is water.
And making
And then
sure that when the
making-
toilet's flush, that things go away, too.
That's the service of making sure that
Yeah.
it's not backed up and keeping those streets well-maintained, rehabilitated, reconstructed, and people can drive in the wintertime.
Yep.
Yeah. Dan?
2 points that I got out of this that I think are worth repeating. Number one, we have a 15-year
Yes.
capital improvements plan, which is essentially funding the depreciation of our equipment, and that is on every asset within the city. Not everybody apparently realizes that. And sometimes I think they don't get that because we don't really publish it or make it readily available. And so sometimes when those types of comments happen, I look at what we're doing and say, well, how easy is it to get at that information? Because we speak in government terms and not in private sector terms in some aspects of our business, like capital improvements versus depreciation and equipment replacement. Second thing is, I've heard this in the past, some people believe that because we're a government, that we have a program of the useful life of something, and sometimes we replace it because it's on schedule to be replaced, whether it's actually still got useful life or not. And that's a misnomer certainly in the city of Burnsville. Could you just touch on that? You did sort of, you circled that subject a little bit, but could you respond directly to that?
I think a good way to respond to that is our fleet. Our fleet has 300 vehicles with a 15 to 20 year programmed out replacement plan for those vehicles. However, we don't just go buy a new truck because it's year 15, it's time to buy the new truck. About 3-4 years before we replace any piece of equipment, our maintenance staff starts really drilling into the maintenance costs of that piece of equipment, the hours on that piece of equipment, the use and condition. And then they begin modifying, either sometimes things move up, but majority of times things are able to move back if they're well maintained, and so that we can extend out those lives. Right. Certainly when you put something into your system, you put in kind of what the design life is for it, but the key to managing it is obviously evaluating it at things on a yearly basis as much as possible, and then having those plans be living, adjusting them out. So we're only replacing things for Burnsville when they need to be replaced, not just because it's 15 years old and it says we should replace it in the plan. And
which is a point to make about the CIP. It's a living document. Some of those assets that are put on the books for that 15 end up going to 16, 17, 18 years before they finally do get replaced, because we've then got their useful life.
Exactly.
And I think the key, too, is extending that useful life is that slide you had of the maintenance facility where it had a police squad car and looked like a snow plow and a fire truck and a few other things. Investing in taking care of those assets extends their life, and they obviously perform far better throughout. And having this in-house, as you pointed out, instead of outsourcing, where you may not be able to control the quality, number one, plus the cost is a factor. This is another reason why we probably get more useful life than the programmed useful life out of the assets that we acquire, because we take good care of them.
Bill?
And just from a little different point of view for our audience, something like road maintenance costs. So you talked about some of the cost pressures that come up from time to time, that is truly a market force-driven event that always can't be predicted with precision. 2 or 3 years ago, we can't predict that the economy might be going well, and you know, for road maintenance costs or something, road improvement might go up 30% in a 1-year period. Would that be a fair statement?
It'd be a very fair statement.
And
that,
is it also a fair statement that we have just experienced that? Is that correct?
the second half of this year we got great bang for our buck with the stuff that we bid in January, February, our reconstruction and our maintenance overlay program.
Yep.
But then we came in the back half of the year, not just parks projects, but our sanitary sewer lift station projects. All of those were at a 30 to 40% markup, and the reality was finding people to do the work right now, if you wanted it done this year, was going to cost you a 20 to 30% premium. And what we've actually done to respond to that is look at those projects and say, do we have to have it done this year, or can we look at bidding it in a different time to adjust costs? If we have to have it done, then we move forward with it. But we've kind of done a little bit of everything. So even those projects are subject to reevaluation and not just awarding something because we got a bid on it. So that's another part of that.
And I want people to know that that picture was not just taken for the picture. That's what that maintenance center looks like, even if you stop by to take a look.
A nice stock photo that was purchased on the web.
Yeah. It's always very clean.
That's really clean.
It is, and when you stop by, because I've gone over whether it's a luncheon or a meeting and looking, it's that clean. So well done.
Well, with that, I will turn it over to Terry Schultz.
Thank you very much. Nicely done.
Thank you, Mr. Albrecht. Madam Mayor, council members, next we'd like to share some information about the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Division. The mission of that division is to build a healthy, sustainable community by providing exceptional recreational programs and community facilities and enhancing our natural resources. We have broken the division into 3 major areas: parks and natural resources, recreation and facilities, and the enterprise funds, which includes the Ice Center, Burnhamwood Golf Course, and the Ames Center. All of those areas are really focused on achieving the city's ends and outcomes that relate to youth, environment, and city services. In Parks and Natural Resources, we maintain a 76 park system with around 1,750 acres of parkland. We maintain the urban forest. We have about 110,000 public trees in our community, and about 12,000 of those are on the boulevards, so they're just not located in the park system. Our division takes care of the heart of the city maintenance, lake, pond, and wetland management, wildlife management. We have deer and goose management programs provide them for our community, sustainability and recycling programs. We do development review. We're part of the development review committee in terms of impacts that projects might have on our natural resources and the environment. And we support a couple of commissions, the Parks and Natural Resources Commission. We provide administrative support for the Black Dog Watershed Management Organization, and we have 2 other watershed management organizations in our community that we also work with. In the recreation and facilities area, we provide recreation programs in the community that includes some things that I'm sure all of you have taken part in, Nicollet Commons events, outdoor skating. We have 13 outdoor skating facilities, adult athletic leagues, youth and family programs, and concession operations. We operate 2 concession stands in 2 of our parks, Lac Lavon and Crystal Beach. We also do facility rentals here at City Hall and throughout the park system. We did roughly 1,300 rentals in 2013, and we expect to be very close to that, perhaps a little bit higher than that for 2014. This division also provides maintenance of 9 city facilities and custodial services. So those aren't traditional park services. They're kind of we're a little bit bigger than that. But we do maintain and clean 9 city facilities. Continuing on with recreation and facilities, one of the things we did this year is we combined community services with recreation and facilities as try to get some efficiencies. I'm going to talk a little bit later about how we're looking at how we do our work to try and be more efficient. But this is one of the things that we did to try and be more efficient. It does, I think, help with both departments, both areas, because they're both involved in offering programs for families and adults and seniors. But we do provide programs for our seniors, Night to Unite, volunteer management. We sent out invitations to over 400 volunteers for the volunteer recognition event last week. We have the mobile volunteer network that we work with, the International Festival, the new Burnsville Youth Collaborative, which you're all familiar with, and again, another example of how we're looking at how we do things not only internally but externally, and how we can partner with other folks to be more efficient and more effective, getting the right agencies doing the right programs. And then we work a lot with grant management administration. Julie Dorshak works with all departments, pulling together grant applications and submitting the reports. And she also works with the community development block grant program. The enterprise facilities, we have the ice center with 2 indoor sheets of ice. Of course, all the maintenance that goes with maintaining that facility. We offer a Learn to Skate program to teach our youth how to skate, starting very young, 3 or 4-year-old programs. And that facility is used by a number of local service groups, hockey club, figure skating, and other programs like that. We have about, 275,000 visitors that come through the ice center on an annual basis. Burnhamwood Golf Course is a 9-hole par 27 golf course, and we offer golf leagues, and of course we maintain that facility. And we had a very wet spring, as Mr. Albrecht mentioned in his report this year, so that did hurt our numbers a little bit. But we think we're going to come in a little bit ahead of 2013, which was also a difficult year. But we will probably provide 20 to 21,000 rounds of golf at Burnhamwood Golf Course in 2014. We also work with the Ames Center and the operation of the Ames Center. And the Ames Center, of course, provides building rental, concerts and shows, dance competitions, drive a lot of our business, weddings and business events. We work with the Angel Fund that helps support performances that might need a little some financial guarantees to bring them into town, and we've had very good luck with them actually performing very well and adding to the fund rather than have to utilize funds and drawing it down. We've had a very good year for sponsorships and donations. Of course, we had the naming rights agreement that was just a huge boost for the bottom line of the Ames Center, which continues to improve into 2014, and we're projecting that it will continue to improve for the years to come. And then we do maintenance of the building, and of course work with Venue Works, who really provides management of the facility.
Dan?
Budget.
Just a quick question on the Ames Center, the Angel Fund. This may be a question that might take some research, but can you, do you have any idea, Terry, of the performances that were leveraged? So the revenue that was leveraged because of the Angel Fund? So in the last, 4 years? I'm sure it goes back a few years, I know.
Yeah, Councilmember Keeley, Madam Mayor, we'll jot that down. We'll be bringing back more detailed information on the enterprise funds for you in November, but I don't have that off the top of my head.
That's a little like TIF, but not for the Angel Fund. These performances would not have come, therefore the revenue would not be there. So I think it's a number I'd like to know as a supporter of the Angel Fund some years ago. I'd like to know what our ROI is on it, and then where the balance is at roughly. You know, I know that's been doing well lately, where it's increasing its balance as opposed to draining it to cover costs for guarantees on shows.
Councilmember Keeley, that's correct, and we'll bring that information back when we bring more detailed information to you in November. I didn't mean to skip that slide. So budget pressures, these are going to sound a lot like Mr. Albrecht's and Public Works, but the park system and the age of our facilities, we're kind of at that bubble. Much of the park system was built in the 70s and 80s, so it's 30 to 40 years old now. And we are having to replace a lot of our infrastructure. Another big factor is price inflation, construction contracts that hit, in particular, the parks projects very hard this year. We had about 5 projects that we went out to bid on, and 4 of them came in over our projected budget, and probably we're at that 30% over estimates that we had done fairly recently. So we're going to, as Mr. Albrecht mentioned, we're going to go back and look at how can we change the timing of when we get bids and how we can change the project itself to get better bids. But it's been a challenge for us, and truly we've seen things in a very short matter of time go up 30%. Part-time staff costs has been a big factor for us in terms of minimum wage increases. This division, we use about 135 seasonal and part-time staff over the course of a year to run our operations during peak time. So, and of course, summers we probably have on 75 to 80 of those part-time staff, and so we're very dependent on seasonal workers to help out with preparing the park system for the users. And so the minimum wage increase had the biggest impact, I would say, on this division. And so we are probably in 75% of the total increase that was caused by minimum wage. The other thing in that regard is the economy is doing very well. It's getting increasingly difficult to find seasonal people to work. So we are finding now where we used to get 30 applications for a position, there's times now where we're getting 4 or 5. So it's good that people are out working, but it's tough if you're trying to find people to work seasonally for you. So that's definitely been a challenge for us. And then Mr. Albrecht mentioned the regulatory requirements and talked about generators. I won't go into that again, but I think you're pretty familiar with that. But also in terms of water quality, Lake Alamagnet, a water quality study is just being completed on that. And we are assuming that there will be some requirements that will come out of that we'll need to look at, improvements that we can make in that watershed. So we continue to have new requirements placed upon us at the local level. In terms of efficiencies, I talked a little bit about evaluating how we do what we do, how we do our work, and we did do some restructuring. Steve mentioned that we work very closely with Public Works and we share resources, and we've done some restructuring in that we have some folks in parks doing the boulevard mowing in the heart of the city area, and that frees up some of the forestry staff so they can focus on emerald ash borer, and we've got some folks in streets doing maintenance on the ramps and the deck, and we used to have a separate crew there, and it's just trying to get, again, the right people doing the job, and we think it's worked out really well, and we've seen some real efficiencies this year, and I think it's improved our service too. So we will continue to look at that. Energy savings we are always looking at, and we will provide a number for you again. You'll look at our sustainability report, but we have been cutting our electricity costs by $20,000 to $30,000 a year, and so we continue to switch out our lights to LED. It's a very good payback, and we are making real gains in terms of saving energy. Grants and donations, you saw at the last council meeting, we've been very successful at grants and getting a lot of donations recently to help out, in particular with park facilities and recreation programs. And last but not least, the Burnsville Youth Collaborative is kind of a new way of looking at how we do services and bringing in other partners that will provide a better program at a less of a cost to the taxpayers. So. Staffing, I won't go through the breakdown, but we have a little bit over 45 full-time and regular part-time staff that do the work in this division. In terms of the budget breakdown, we've broken down Parks and Natural Resources. You will notice a lot of that is the Park CIP. About half of that budget is capital expenses. And as Mr. Albrecht mentioned, we have a very detailed plan of our park system, all the amenities. We have a life expectancy for all the major amenities. And as they come up to be replaced, we don't just do it. We go out and field verify what the condition actually is and reevaluate. And we move annually. I move facilities back and forth. Some need to be moved up a little. Some need to be moved back. Playground equipment we're finding is lasting longer than it did before because of the materials that are used. We don't have wood structures anymore. Hockey rink boards are lasting a little bit longer for us because of treated lumber and how well it works. So we're being able to extend the life of things, and we do that whenever we can. Recreation facilities, mostly personnel costs. The Youth Collaborative is mostly capital cost in this pie chart. This is for 2015, and that is because of the proposed renovation to the facility over at the garage. And the golf course has about a $300,000 operating budget that is mostly personnel. And Ice Center, $1.2 million budget, again, mostly personnel and expenses. I should point out that both the Ice Center and the golf course cover their operating costs through the revenues they bring in at those facilities. In the Ames Center, you'll see most of the funding there. It's a relatively new building, not a lot of capital costs right now, is operations, and again, that's because it's contracted service for the operation of that facility. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Terry? Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And for our folks to also understand, again, the point that you made, our park facility is like our streets are aging, and we have all of these assets that we need to maintain. So let me ask you this. In that $500 million that you talk of assets that you talk about, did you include our park system? So all of those assets are all there, and that's what our residents need to understand. That we are stewards of $500 million worth of assets in this city, and that our staff is charged to make sure that they're maintained. But at the same time, we have the responsibility of making sure we make good decisions to make sure those assets are protected, maintained, and that the quality of life for our citizens is protected. Because with some of those equipment, it's about safety also. Roads is about safety as well. Yeah, Dan.
Just one comment. In driving around the city the last couple of months, passing a lot of our parks, I've noticed a lot of our recreational equipment has been replaced in the last few years. So much of it looks so much newer. Citing the tennis courts that have been resurfaced, especially the playground equipment, converting from older stuff that had a lot of wood to the newer equipment, brighter colors. I mean, I was impressed. It seemed like every park I passed had a really new recreational equipment installed and a new base and trim around it. So I think as much as we have struggled to fund all the things that you've needed in parks, putting it nicely, over the last several years, I mean, going back through the recession, today I see evidence of a lot of reinvestment in those parks and a lot of equipment that make them very appealing to kids and families and, I mean, just living in the city. So even though it seemed as though we hadn't been able to do a lot of that, visibly there's a lot of it that did get done. And so to
We have
your
a
credit,
big challenge coming up.
absolutely, to your credit, it looks pretty good. I mean, I was very pleased in driving around the city, literally every street in the city, and seeing all the parks and all the recreational equipment. I don't remember seeing one that was, you know, in where it was real obvious that it needed a major overhaul or something. You know, the playground equipment completely replaced. So, good job. And the tennis courts look really good. We passed a couple that have been resurfaced in the last couple of years, and very, very nice.
Thank you, Councilmember Keeley. A lot of that credit goes to our park maintenance staff. They do a wonderful job of keeping things up.
Thank you. Chief Isaki.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for allowing me to be here tonight and talk about the police department. You should all be in a good mood after hearing about the parks. Right? That's the plan anyways. My opportunity here is to give a brief overview of the police department, bring you up to speed on a few of the things. We really have 7 main components of the police department, starting with administration. I just want to point out we run lean at the top. We have, compared to other agencies, same or similar size, we do run thin at the top with just myself, 2 captains. One captain oversees patrol, the other captain oversees investigation and community resources. Also included in the administration portion of the PD is an executive assistant and also a services manager who oversees basically all non-sworn personnel to include our property custodian. Patrol obviously is the biggest bulk of the department, the largest resource that we have, and by far the busiest. Our community resources encompasses our community resource unit. Under that branch, we have 1 sergeant that works full-time with two officers full-time that are dedicated to dealing with community resource issues and community problems or concerns. A large portion of what they do is deal with multi-housing issues or other areas. Also under that same division is our community or school resource officers. We continue to support that program, obviously, with all the school violence across the country. That's something that I would never support getting rid of. We have 2 full-time officers at the high school, one at Nicollet Junior High. And again, as part of our community outreach, we have area officers assigned to schools that don't fall under the high school or junior high, and that's part of our Blue in the School program. We'll continue to support that. And the area officers get out and touch base with those schools on a regular basis. Our investigation unit continues to be busy. We have 10 full-time investigators, 7 we consider core or permanent. They operate at a higher level, and 3 rotating investigators. The rotating position gives us an opportunity to do a number of things. One, career development for the officers who are on the street that want to look for other opportunities to grow and develop. And when they do go back on the road, it's in theory a better resource for us on the street. We also have 2 investigative sergeants that work full-time back there overseeing that unit. We typically divide the investigation unit down into a couple categories: persons crimes and properties crimes. So I'm very proud of that unit. They work very hard. Also, we're in charge of animal control. I'd like to point out that's a service that we contract with a local business. They've done an adequate job for us. We'll continue to use them, but we do look for opportunities outside the walls of the PD to partner with different agencies or people that have a niche that we don't necessarily have. That seems to be a cost-effective way of doing it. Also, we're responsible for emergency preparedness for every natural or man-made disaster. We have 1 sergeant assigned to that full-time. Sergeant Don Stanger does a wonderful job. He's dedicated to that position. He's been in that for a number of years. He interfaces with all the other city departments. He also acts as the liaison through the county and at a state level too. And recently he was responsible for preparing a joint exercise countywide at the Burnsville Center. So he really branches out and does a lot of different things and works well with local agencies, schools, businesses, and the hospital as well.
Chief, Dan.
I think it'd be a good opportunity before you get into some of the stats to talk about, because of that community services and that kind of, community resources,
Yep.
To maybe highlight how our department builds a relationship with the community, with residents, businesses, et cetera. To the Blue in the School, obviously, with our youth. What are the other areas that the department utilizes in sort of community outreach and relationship development with our community?
That's a great question. Obviously, we all know that your level of success is based on the quality of your relationships. So we work very hard in establishing very good relationships. A couple examples: we do a Citizens Academy annually. I think this is our 7th or 8th year. One of the biggest complaints we get about that 11-week course is that it's not longer. We get people that wish they could come back and stay with it. So that's been awesome. And we also have, so we reach out, that touches hundreds of people, because at the end we invite family and friends. So that's labor intensive, but it gives it's a much deeper dive into the police organization. Again, 11 weeks, and they're meeting a wide range of officers throughout that time period. We our block captains is another example of ways we reach out. Recently we had Behind the Badger Senior Safety Camp, so we work on those things, and I'm probably drawing a blank on a few others, but we're continuing to go out there and do those.
Do you have if I live in a particular area or have a business in a particular area, will I have the same patrol officers, various shifts obviously that have that sort of beat? I hate to use that word, but.
Yep, what we do is
We're in zones.
Yep, we have 4 distinct patrol areas. So we changed our philosophy years ago. We used to rotate the area the officer worked every day with a philosophy of you get to know the entire city. The expectation is still that the officers know the entire city, but we bid based on seniority once a year, and the officer picks one specific geographic area. So in other words, for at least 12 months, they're going to know the individuals, businesses, families, schools, whatever's in that area. They're going to get to know that area very well. And a lot of times what you'll find is the officers will continue to pick the same area over and over. In fact, that's what I did for years. I picked North River Hills because I just got to know it and love the area. So we do that, and it's the officers have the option which area they want to work with and the people they want to get to know. And a lot of the reasons they continue to pick the same areas because of the people they meet, the quality of the relationships that they develop while they're there.
Absolutely. Well, that's great, because I think having an unfamiliar face just sort of feels a little bit more distance than getting to know a familiar face, especially an officer in blue that is patrolling and taking care of their neighborhood, watching over their neighborhood. That's an important part of that relationship building that the police department does with the city.
Yeah, I think the best example of that is recently we had our 50th year anniversary, and one of the victims in Burnsville, Paul Traub, mentioned that how the officers were paying attention to his house and actually showed up at his house after he'd been released from the hospital. So that's a good example of how that does actually happen.
Thank you.
One of the things that we hear often when you're out in Night to Unite is that the officers get to know the behavior of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
What cars are there, what cars aren't supposed to be there. And they all talk to one another, and they also know who their officer is to call.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the value.
And it's really easier to manage that and hold the officers accountable, too, for that one specific area.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Again, we have the statistics, and we won't dig too deep in these because there's a lot of numbers here, but a couple of main things I want to point out. Unfortunately, this year, thus far, we have not had a homicide. I think we all know last year we were challenged with 3. By this time last year, so far, 0. That's a good trend. We want to pay attention to that. The other trends that I think are just noteworthy, Part 1 crimes are typically more serious crimes or crimes that people are more likely to report. Those are down slightly, almost 8%. We like that trend. Part 2 crimes, about the same, but overall Part 1, Part 2 crimes are about the same. Our efforts in traffic enforcement are steady. Again, that number is consistent. We haven't peaked, we haven't gone down, but we continue to make an effort to get after traffic the best we can. One of the numbers there I would ask you to pay attention to is just the crisis calls. We've really been challenged the last few years. We've seen a trend and a spike in those types of calls. They've gone up significantly. I know some of you have personal knowledge or have been out on calls with us, and you see the number of resources that it requires to deal with some of those. They're labor intensive. Again, it may be just one simple call for service, but without exaggeration, you may tie up an entire shift for an extended period of time. So that's where we've seen some of the biggest challenges in those particular areas. And again, we talked about the community outreach actions that we've worked on.
Mary?
Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by a crisis call?
Crisis call typically is when someone's in a mental health crisis or having an emotional issue of some sort. Sometimes chemicals are involved, drugs or alcohol. Sometimes it's not. But we have officers trained in crisis intervention. It's a labor-intensive training course, over 40 hours a week. You want to take those calls slow. You don't want to rush those calls. You want to be patient with the individuals. And sometimes their behavior and their response to law enforcement is extremely unpredictable. And that's where anecdotally, I hear the officers talk, and I hear the calls they go on, and I see it, and there's a significant increase in those calls. Last week, I went on a short ride-along for just a few hours, and I think there was 3 crisis calls in just a 3-hour period. So that's what I'm referring to, and it can run the gamut, so.
Well, and just, if I can just speak to my own experience, I just had a ride-along on Friday, and then the one I had done a year ago, each one head of one of the calls was a mental health crisis. And so, excuse me, I could see what you mean by labor-intensive, but also in each case, I was extremely impressed with the way our PD handled the individual who was suffering greatly, and each person was handled with great compassion and care, and the resolution was successful, but only because of the great skills. So I appreciate that training.
I know the officers, and I do appreciate you being out there too, seeing firsthand some of the things I'm talking about
Yeah,
tonight.
it's great. Yeah, it's hard work.
We're not going to let you on any more ride-alongs, though.
Yeah. And
You
the
get
other
3
thing
per
is,
year only?
the other is also
No, I
medical
want a year.
calls. Crisis calls, are the medical calls that you go out and that you partner with fire with.
Yeah.
That'll come in. But I mean, when I'm on ride-alongs, it's a person going into a diabetic incident, and that's a crisis call.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and if I can follow up, because I didn't mean to shortchange the EMTs
Yeah.
who did show up Friday night on this call. So there were five public safety people involved with this one call. And it was beautiful to watch how well it was handled. So thank you both.
And I do want to compliment the fire department because these numbers impact both of us. Typically,
It was
there's
a team.
Yeah.
a
Actual
request
team.
for an ambulance transport, and they've been very good about helping us in a variety of ways.
And Chief, I think it would be beneficial for our folks to hear from both of you, because I've had them ask, why is it when there's a call, you have police show up and then you also have fire show up? And yet they don't understand that with fire there is the medical emergency piece around that, because in every ride-along I've done, there was always some incident that required EMT to take over. And it's that elegant dance between the two public service divisions that really make.
Yeah, Friday night, the
Make a
woman had to be
difference.
transported to the hospital, but her potential for getting out of control was really high. I mean, if I was mentally doing, calculating the bet, and my bet is that she was not going to go willingly, but because of the deft and careful handling of both the police, first the police, and then when the EMTs arrived, fire EMTs, she agreed that she needed help and got into the ambulance. So, but it took
That's
a
the
lot
main
of
goal.
people.
That's
It
the
was-
main goal, to give them help when they need it, and we do it together when they need
it
it.
was very reassuring to see.
We appreciate the fire department, we truly do. As much as I like to give them a hard time, they can't get there fast enough as far as I'm concerned on a lot of these things. I'll be the first to admit that. Some of the budget pressures, again, I've mentioned this before, but it's the unpredictable calls that we get. We just touched on that. You may get a call that requires additional resources to come in, and a lot of times one particular call can eat up your entire shift. So then you're bringing in additional resources, and sometimes these calls, when they get long and complex, it'll extend people in their shift. So one of the other things that we can't control is some of the investigation, complex or large-scale incidents when they go past our borders, or they require multiple people being involved, and the cases have become more complex due to technology, and those are things that sometimes create additional pressures for us. Additional pressures, just the increased cost of technology. As much as technology is a benefit, there's also a cost attached to that. Some examples, we're in the process of upgrading our CAD mobile, TriTech CAD mobile, so the officers will have a better software product in their squads to respond to calls as well as the fire department. That's expensive, but that'll improve how we do things. Also APS, just the software we need to use to manage and investigate some of these cases that we're involved with, is a very valuable tool, but there's a cost to that as well. A couple examples, if I can, on just budget efficiencies. Technology is expensive, but we also embrace it and use it. I want to point out the fact that we're still using on-officer cameras. The goal would be by the end of the year to have full deployment for all uniformed officers. We're close to that. We've been working on this for 4 years. We started in 2010. First in the state of Minnesota, and we get calls from across the nation after some of the high-profile incidents that have occurred this past summer. We're still learning how to use that technology. It's changed. It's evolved. We've done a slow, deliberate rollout because we've learned things about it that work well. We've also learned about some challenges as well. So we've taken our time, and I think we're close to the point. I hope by the end of the year, that's the goal, is to have it out there for all the officers. Again, I've been asked, how do you measure the benefits of that? It's difficult sometimes. Anecdotally, I can tell you story after story, but sometimes you get a call or a complaint, and you can resolve it within a very short period of time to demonstrate to the individual what in fact happened, not what they thought happened. And it's hard to put a price tag on that. Otherwise, I may be signing an investigator or internal affairs officer to investigate a case that would take literally hours or weeks to come up with the same resolution that oftentimes we've been able to resolve in just a few seconds or a few minutes of watching a video. And sometimes it's the simplest complaint you can imagine, but we're able to handle that. Mayor?
No, here's the video.
Yep. And I want to be cautious because I've been told, I understand video doesn't capture everything. It captures a portion of it. I'm well aware of that, and it's two-dimensional, but it's still a very valuable tool that we can use in a variety of ways. So we'll continue to use that. Another way I want to demonstrate that we're trying to be efficient is we just started implementing Lexipol, which is a web-based policy management software tool. To maintain good policy, to make sure we meet state and federal mandates, is labor intensive. I think we've done an adequate job, but we're behind. We could do a better job, and I think this product is going to ensure that we do that. It's a way to hold the officers accountable. It's a way to make sure they understand it, and it's a way to make sure we don't have one or two individuals that is tasked with just doing policy. It's very difficult to track policies that were in place 3 or 4 years ago and to keep updated. So I think it's cutting edge. It really represents, I think, best practices, and it's a model that a lot of agencies in the state are going to. So I'm glad we're in the process of utilizing that for our agency. Probably one of the biggest things I'm excited about moving forward is we're working with 10 of the 12 agencies in Dakota County to form an electronic crimes unit. We're in the process of just finishing up the joint powers agreement. It's very unique. It's a similar model to the drug task force, but really what we're doing in this situation is we're recognizing that moving forward, we can't solve crimes like we always have. The challenges that we face, most crimes that we deal with, there's an electronic component to it, whether it's a tablet, a phone, or a computer. And what we've done, the 10 of us that have partnered together, agreed to partner together, is we recognize that Burnsville doesn't need to buy the same equipment that another agency has or that the county might have. When we can start to share our pool resources, pool our human resources, and start to come up with a model that helps us attack this problem. And we've examined it across the country. There are very few models out there. There's very few models we can use as a role model, so we're kind of going out there on our own, if you will, and it's a 3-year pilot program, so I'm excited about that. But I think, again, it demonstrates we're not trying to do it alone. We're working with other agencies and using their technology as well as ours to kind of get after some of these upcoming challenges. Staffing, again, I'm proud of this picture. We recently took it. That's the entire police department, sworn and non-sworn. We haven't had a department photo since 1991, so we were long overdue. Again, it just demonstrates the people that we have out there every day, the 75 sworn, the 9 civilian full-time, 9 civilian part-time, and of course we don't want to neglect our 2 canine partners because they're part of the police family as well. And quick overview of the budget. Obviously, we're the lion's share of the city's budget. I realize and recognize that. We're an expensive asset to the community. Our equipment's not cheap. Our personnel certainly were not cheap, but as you can see in the picture, the previous slide demonstrates it. We have a lot of people out there working hard for it every day and for the citizens of Burnsville without question, all the time, 7/24, 365. So a good portion of our budget obviously is personnel. Our capital outlay pretty much consists of squad cars and replacing those when they need it. Current expenses, typically it's training, it's equipment, and all of the above. It's the smallest portion of our budget, but it's what we use to really make sure that we're cutting edge and that we're out there and we're doing what we need to do for the citizens of Burnsville. Last, certainly not least, the 10% you see up there is for Dakota Communications Center. I'd also like to point out that's for the police department, but that's also for the fire department too. We need to be dispatched. We need that technology. We need that resource to make sure we can get the calls and get sent to the calls. That is pretty much an overview of what we have at the police department, but I'll certainly...
Chief, and all of the new technology and the communications that we have, the interoperability between your department and fire, is that all part of this?
Yes.
Okay, because I want to make sure that as you're purchasing all of this equipment, that you can talk to one another.
Yep, and we're working on that. We both share that. We want to be able to do that, and we think that's the best way to be able to deliver the services to the community. So that's at the forefront, and we've had discussions about that in great detail to make sure that works.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Fire Department, our Fire Chief, B.J. Jungman.
Mayor, Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for your time. Now that Chief Gieske stole my thunder and talked about half the things I wanted to talk about,
Did you have a compliment for him because he had one for you?
He did. He is a great partner, I will say. We are very fortunate to have a police-fire relationship that many cities do not enjoy, and I will tell you from the administrative level on down to the street level, our staff works flawlessly together, and that's important. I know a few of you have shared your experiences tonight of what you've seen, but that's truly what happens every day on the street, and that's a testament to Chief Gieske's leadership and setting the tone for what he expects of his officers and for our folks. So that's been wonderful.
Just a quick question. So do you have like a softball game or a basketball game, police versus fire, to find out who's, the better of the two each
Hey,
year?
we used to have a bowling. How come we don't do that anymore?
We've tried the wing eating contest, and now they've resorted to hockey. So.
Yeah, I remember the wing eating contest.
Yeah. A little bit about the fire department. The fire suppression is probably the thing people think about most, is calling 911 and we show up with trucks and deal with whatever their emergency is, from a smell of gas to something on fire to recreational fires, whatever that may be. That's really what our fire suppression folks deal with every day. The second thing, in the lion's share of those 911 calls that we respond to are EMS or emergency medical service calls for service. That's about 70% of what we do. And in our service, most of our folks are paramedics. So whether they show up on a fire engine or they show up on an ambulance, they're able to provide that advanced level care immediately. And we'll talk a little bit later about efficiencies, but one of the things is we really try to triage how we deal with these calls and only send the resources that are appropriate. And it's a collaboration between the police department, the fire department, and the Dakota Communications Center, and it relies on the Dakota Communications Center staff to ask the questions and get the appropriate answers so that we can send the right resources to these calls. So if it's a basic level call, we will just send an ambulance, and they may not even go lights and sirens on some of the lower acuity calls, all the way up to the point of a major emergency where you have police, fire, and ambulance going to these calls. We talked about crisis calls earlier, and that really is becoming more and more of the advanced life support calls that we go on, or the EMS calls that we do go on, our crisis calls. And one of the challenges with those, not to get into budget pressures already, but those patients get transported to a downtown hospital, which is generally 21 miles each way. So we take our staff out of town longer because Fairview Ridges and Fairview Southdale aren't really equipped to deal with those crisis patients. They need to go to other facilities that have the appropriate staff. We also have a technical rescue team made up of our staff that have 5 different disciplines that are prepared to respond to anything from, someone trapped in an enclosed area, confined space we would call that, to a building collapse or something that might cave in if we were to have construction incident. So we have staff ready for that. Fire prevention is kind of a broad category, but our fire prevention folks do a lot. And really, we have 2 people assigned to the fire prevention division, but this is an effort amongst all the staff to prevent fires. And really, the prevention staff, the 2 people that are assigned there, work on plan review and issue permits for fire alarms, fire suppression systems, things of that nature. They conduct fire inspections, and those are generally licensing inspections or complaint-based inspections. We don't do a whole lot of preventative inspections just because of the volume we have to deal with on the licensing and complaint basis. We also do fire code enforcement, and we do fire investigations. We're obligated under law to investigate fires over a certain dollar loss, and we spend a good chunk of time dealing with that. And we've had a few significant incidents over the past year that we've investigated. And then the last piece is public education. We spend a lot of time trying to educate the public. As you know, a couple years ago we applied for that grant, and we're still working on gathering data from that, but we really target our multifamily housing because that's where we see a lot of the older infrastructure and the bigger impact on people if they were to have a fire. And then the senior population, and then our kids in school, kindergarten, 2nd, and 4th grade. A little bit about our budget pressures. Obviously, fire and EMS calls are the lion's share of that. We continue to see an increase in those. We're on track to see a 5.5% increase in that call volume this year. And a lot of those pressures on the fire calls have to do with the aging population, the aging buildings and infrastructure, and the multi-housing that we frequently respond to. Response times, as we continue to get busier, our concurrent call volume continues to go up, and the response vehicles are coming from further away. So it's increasingly difficult to meet the response time expectation. Property fire loss is one of the things we measure, and that's lots of times tough to control from our perspective, and we look at that as kind of an outcome of public education and fire prevention. Is early notification of fires and trying to get there and be effective when we do get there with our staff. The number of patients served in EMS billing, the EMS world, or the medical world in general, continues to become more complicated, more regulated, and the EMS billing side of this continues to become more and more complicated, particularly dealing with a majority of our patients are either Medicare or Medicaid patients. We get reimbursed at I would consider a low rate for what we bill for, and we must take that. And then the last thing is fire inspections. Like I said, we really focus on the complaints and the licensing inspections on the fire inspection side.
Sorry. I noticed on your chart,
Yep.
Chief, that it looks like we generally, at least the last 6 years, we're billing about 70, give or take, %
Correct.
of the calls.
Yep.
Are those they're all billable calls, right? I mean,
They're actually,
Ideally.
they're not.
okay, some of them are.
Yep.
So 4,229 calls, 3,170 billed.
Yep.
That's actual billed, not collected and/or.
That's not collected, that's just
Okay.
billed. And the difference there comes down to patients that are not transported. If they're not transported and they're not treated, then we don't bill them. So about 30% of the patients don't get transported. I think there's an assumption in the public that you call 911, we get there, and we automatically transport the patient. And that's not necessarily the case. The paramedics get there, evaluate them. It's very common, like in car accidents, minor car accidents, we'll go evaluate the patient, and as long as no treatment is provided, that's not a billable call for us. And that's where that discrepancy of the 30% generally is.
Okay.
Is that they're not either treated or transported.
Thank you.
Some of the efficiencies we've had over the past few years are the use of technology. I think you've heard us all refer to that, but technology has been a great efficiency for us. One of the things we've done is online training. As the regulatory environment's increased for us over the past 3 years, online training has allowed us to accomplish a lot of those regulatory requirements with that platform. So folks in the fire stations, when they're not on calls and not doing physical training, they can be on a computer doing the online training, so we meet those requirements. We've had a lot of integrated solutions over the last few years that have brought systems together and created efficiencies and connected those systems so we don't have duplicate data entry, and we've reduced the amount of time it takes us to do some of the required reporting on the fire and EMS reports. I talked about triaging calls earlier. That's Dakota Communications Center helping us by performing EMD, emergency medical dispatching, and with the new CAD system implementation next October, they'll be doing something similar for the fire calls, which will allow us to better send the right resource for the right call. So we're not sending people just in case. We're sending people based on the information that we have. The challenge there is with more and more people calling with cell phones, you have a lot more passerbys, and the ability to get accurate information becomes a little bit sketchy. The equipment, we've standardized a lot of our equipment, and we've what we call cross staffing is if the units are in the station, rather than driving big trucks all the time, like the ladder truck, we try to cross staff that and only use it when we have things like a structure fire. So we try to gain some efficiencies by using our personnel a little bit more efficient. And like I talked about, the use of our personnel, although everybody's a firefighter paramedic within our system, they all have lots of different specialties, whether it's field training officer, whether it's they're part of the health and wellness committee, whether they're doing different things for the department. We have a lot of people that specialize in different training and are in different areas, and they accomplish a lot of work besides going on emergency calls. So we've got a lot out of our people outside of just the basic expectation of showing up, going on calls, and keeping themselves proficient. And then collaboration is kind of the last one, is we pride ourselves on collaborating with our neighbors a lot. The Able Training Facility is a great example of that. We do a lot of mutual aid and auto aid with our neighboring agencies, and I think we'll see more of that to come as we just received that collaboration grant and look forward to what's the long-term things we can do more efficiently with our neighbors. Those are kind of the efficiencies we have. And next year we have more efficiencies to come, and we're looking forward to implementing more of those. As far as staffing, we have 40 staff members. 39 of them are sworn firefighters and 1 administrative assistant. So we're pretty lean on the administrative side, and most of our people are out performing the functions. 33 of those 40 people are assigned to 24-hour shifts and work at the fire stations. Our 2015 budget overview, $6.6 million between general fund and capital. Again, the lion's share of that being personnel related, since the majority of our staff are out there providing that service. 14% current expenditures and 7% capital outlay. And with that, I would stand for any questions you'd have.
Questions for the chief? Nicely done. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And our next presenter is our Community Development Director, Jenny Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, as you know, we've got 4 divisions in community development, and I will just highlight them and then summarize with the budget efficiencies and budget pressures. The Economic Development Division supports the activities of the Economic Development Authority and the Economic Development Commission. It's a body that makes a recommendation to the City Council. The Economic Development Division staff and then the commission also review applications related to tax increment financing, tax abatement, our business subsidy policy. We also work on business retention opportunities in the city, deal with current businesses that want to expand or looking to relocate. We also try to create opportunities as far as redevelopment goes, what grant resources are out there. We've been very successful at getting various grants from the county or from the state agencies. Working specifically on Heart of the City redevelopment. We have a few parcels left there to develop. The Minnesota River Quadrant, particularly all the soils work that is there now, we created that opportunity under the umbrella of the Economic Development Authority. Also, we deal a lot with partnerships. We've got great relationships, not only with the brokers and the business community that are customers, but also greater MSP, which markets our region to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. The Dakota County Community Development Agency. They are responsible for handling all of our housing and then some economic development programs. The Dakota Scott Workforce Investment Board, they deal with job creation and economic development. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, we have a direct relationship with them. That's bringing tourists to our community, making sure our community looks good for our visitors and our businesses. And the MCCD program, which is the Open to Business program, which is a business consulting service that we provide for our existing and then businesses that want to locate here. You can see there who the customers are as far as economic development projects. Our work next year will focus on the Minnesota River Quadrant. We still have a lot of work to be done there. And then 2016, we'll be talking about a comprehensive economic development plan as part of our comprehensive plan amendment to be due in 2018. So we'll begin that work. In the planning division, that division is responsible for development review activities. Those are land use clearance activities, a conditional use permit, a plan unit development, a variance, those kinds of uses that would require planning commission review and city council approval. We process our applications within 60 days in a manner to be as business friendly as possible, and we bundle applications. So applications are done in a comprehensive and thorough manner to better assist the process in general, but also to help the business as a one-stop shop. This division is also responsible for long-range comprehensive planning, dealing with the Metropolitan Council, as we've talked about this year. We spent a lot of time in that area. Any special studies that the Planning Commission or yourselves ask for on a land use basis, we certainly take up that activity, and administration of the zoning ordinance in general. You can see there who the customers are. This upcoming year, we're going to be focusing on the Met Council policy plans, what impacts that will have on the city as we prepare for our comprehensive plan. As I said, that work will begin in 2016. In the Protective Inspections Division, that is the clearinghouse for most city permits. So whenever somebody wants to do something with their house, their business that they're located in, they need to come in and check and see if they need a permit. That includes plumbing, mechanical, electrical, building, grading permits. There's a whole host of permits that run through that department. They spend most of their time, however, on permit plan review. We are in fully developed community, so it's a lot of redevelopment. The codes are changing all the time, so we have to make sure the plan review activities set the stage for how the building is going to happen, that's done properly, and then, of course, those field inspections that follow that. This division has the staff person that's responsible for administering our Trackit online software. That's a software that covers many departments in the city. It's not a community development software. We run our tree contractor licenses run out of that, or business licensing, rental licensing runs out of that, in addition to all of our permits. And then, of course, we try to get creative and come up with programs that encourage home improvements. Our housing stock is aging, so through our inspections program, what can we do to help homeowners improve their homes? You'll see there who the customers are. And then things that this division is working on for next year is there's a new home remodeling fair in the works that we're partnering with the Chamber, Burnsville Chamber of Commerce, and trying to kind of come up with something new for that. And then also some code updates. And then just one thing I want to highlight with you. We've had some staff changes in this division. We have a new building official. When we get a new building official, we have to re-up our delegation agreements with the state of Minnesota. That's a rigorous process, and so we'll be spending 2015 to get that delegation agreement back. What that agreement does is it allows us to do the plan review for state licensed facilities. So it would be like a hospital, schools, prisons, which we don't have any, but primarily hospitals and schools in Burnsville and nursing homes. Those are state licensed facilities. we need to have a delegation agreement from the state to be able to do that. Otherwise, they have to go to the state, and things take longer at the state, as you know, and so we need to get that back so that we can provide the level of service that is expected in Burnsville.
And Jenny, that would be very beneficial because Ebenezer is having problems right now because they have to go to the state.
Exactly.
And if that comes back to us, that would make it more efficient for our business and, the hospitals and the schools and the hospitals and the nursing homes.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Licensing and Code Enforcement Division, as you know, is a newly created division. This is the end of their second year of being up full and running with regard to the rental license and proactive code enforcement activities. With that new division, we've merged in the business licensing component, so that includes the liquor, tobacco, massage ordinances fall under this, and then the code enforcement programs. We previously had a complaint-based only. That is now merged with the new activities of the proactive. This division spends a lot of their time communicating with residents and businesses about what the expectations are and taking complaints from the public. In 2015, we had some staff changes recently within the last 6 months. We're still dealing with those, and we had a retirement recently, so we've got a position to fill there. And what we've done there is modified the department so that the inspectors, the rental license inspectors, are also code enforcement inspectors. Those used to be different positions, so to be more efficient and to better manage the workload with the resources that we have, they're now all cross-trained, so we have backups when people are gone, and we have people who are since they're out in that neighborhood anyways, they can address the issue if they're out on a rental inspection. And then in 2016, that will be the end of our third year of implementation of this program. We will come back to you with a full review of the program and address any changes that the council would want to make at that time. Budget pressures overall for community development include aging properties. We've talked about this at a recent work session, and what tools do we have to address the aging properties in our community. Keeping our ordinances relevant as buildings age and new uses come up with technologies, how do they fit into the land use of the city? Dealing with concerns that we have with the Met Council. Dealing with staff turnover and trying to improve our process, including obtaining that delegation agreement. Under licensing and code enforcement, the biggest issue there is dealing with unresolved code compliance issues. Our number of citations that we issued last year doubled. So far this year we're up to 30. I think we were at half of that last year. So dealing with just those long-standing code violations. Some of the efficiencies that we've gained over the years, one of the most significant is we went to all hybrid vehicles. I think since 2009, 2008 this has started, and our fuel cost has gone down 75%. So this is a huge improvement on the expense side. Where it's appropriate, we do use consultants. We tried a consultant to do our fire inspections for our rental license, and that ended up not being as efficient as we wanted to, but certainly we use planning consultants instead of hiring another city planner. We use our planning consultant to carry that extra load, similar to the engineering review consultant that Steve talked about. We're combining the rental license and code enforcement into a combined position that will create some efficiencies. We have a lot of partners, like I talked about, so utilizing greater MSP and open to business for some of our marketing activities and to provide that business assistance. They're just an extension of the staff, the open to business program is. The CDA, we partner with them. They oversee all the housing programs for the city. A lot of cities have their own HRA. Here in Dakota County, we've partnered with the county to gain those efficiencies, so they do that on our behalf. Also going online with our Track-It, our CRW, and we are currently working on an online system for assessment, so people will be able to go online and see what their pending assessments are, what their outstanding bills may be, so there will be less calls coming in, more clear and accurate information received on the other end because it's all in one stop.
CRW, could you explain that?
That's our Track-It system
But what does
vendor.
CRW stand for?
It's just CRW. It doesn't. It's the person's
the brand,
initials.
like the name of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, but you did say what it was, but I thought it was an acronym. Thank you.
Okay. And then efficiencies and charging fees for service, especially in our code compliance cases, charging for re-inspections. We've made significant gains compared to last year, first year in the program. This year, we're second year in the program. I think we've nearly doubled the amount of revenue that we've collected in that area compared to last year. And you saw with the assessments that you did, I think we're in the $50,000 range. So we're collecting more revenue, and overall our fees are covering our costs in that area. Staffing, we've got a total of 17.5 FTE. And then our general budget, it's about $1.8 million. Most of it covers personnel, and then there's about 13% that covers the training and the vehicles and the fuel and those types of things. And Madam Mayor, members of the council, I will stand for any questions.
Very well done. Any questions for Jenny?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Done. And it's good to hear that on the code enforcement, we're moving towards having it pay for itself. So, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hard work,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's and what people need to know, and we've heard it from every one of our staff members, we're an aging community, and our biggest, because people say, what is the biggest challenge in a city? And I always say, property maintenance and the age of the infrastructure. But property maintenance is what a lot of the calls we all get, not only those of us on the elected level, but on the staff level. It's a lot of it has to do with code enforcement.
Well,
Mary?
I think when you talk about code enforcement, and even we were talking about the streets and all,
Yes.
yes, we are aging, but that doesn't mean we have to be run down.
No, and we're not.
And that's
And
what,
that's-
especially the code enforcement is meant to do, and I think it has definitely shown results, so
Yeah,
thank you.
and we take great pride in the image and the visual appeal of our city, so it's attractive, and that its value continues to stay up, because people need to understand that when the city is well-maintained and kept up, then the value of all properties also stay up.
Everybody wins.
Yeah. Jenny?
Similar to how Public Works protects the public investment, the programs in community development help to protect the private investment. So while you may protect your own, or a business may, it ensures that their neighbors, are held to that same standard, so that everyone's private investment is maintained collectively.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. And now we have Mr. Tom Venables, our IT director, who's going to talk to us about the Information Technology Department.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm glad to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the technology department and the services we provide. We're an internal service department providing service to all parts of our organization as direct customers. Our direct customers are our employees and our groups that we support within city facilities, and our indirect customers are, of course, the people they support, the residents and the businesses. So we have great involvement in a lot of areas. We build out enterprise-based systems to support that by using centralized budgeting and centralized procurement processes to provide those level of services to all the departments. We, of course, are involved in a lot of different things and core systems, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the major systems today that keep us busy and keep our operations moving forward. Many of it obviously is core infrastructure, which includes a lot of equipment and software. These include our network infrastructure that connects all of our facilities. Today we interconnect about 63 facilities. The majority of those are non-staffed facilities. Those would be water utility sites. And 14 of those facilities are staffed facilities that actually have staff at them. One is actually a mobile facility, mobile command center. Another one would be our new fire training facility, our Able training site. And then also we also provide IT services to parking ramps and decks in this community. So providing security and access controls and computers to staff that work out of those facilities. That incorporates a lot of things. Of course, obviously, computers, desktops, servers, wired and wireless services, laptops, smart mobile devices, citywide phone systems, basic internet service, wired and wireless service at all those facilities. And then also our department gets involved in managing and maintaining the antenna sites and assets and tower facilities that the city owns and maintains. Linda Glore, of course, is part of the IT department. Her primary job function is to manage that portion of the operation that handles a lot of the revenue that's brought in annually through our
Great
antenna leasing.
enterprise.
And so we're involved in that also from the standpoint of our fiber optics that connect all those facilities. Linda is involved in that process too. Today, our fiber optics connect all those 54 of the 63 facilities I mentioned earlier. Our fiber optics maintenance costs are now cost neutral to the city by the fact that we lease out and license out that fiber infrastructure to public and private partners in the community to help improve either broadband services or also to improve services that they're looking for to get their facilities connected within the city boundaries. Some of the other city systems that we support at a core level include our document management system, where all of our electronic documents are. Hopefully you've seen evidence that we're becoming more of a paperless environment and getting rid of more and more file cabinets and moving forward on a lot of paperless initiatives. We also provide core support to our GIS infrastructure that provides a lot of our mapping and engineering services. Again, I mentioned our phone service. These systems that I'm highlighting really extend out to all the facilities I mentioned earlier, so we leverage these across our entire enterprise instead of creating silos of solutions at each one of those facilities. We try to extend these services through a centralized service that we can provide from our main data center here at City Hall and not have to duplicate those things at those facilities. We also get involved in, of course, security systems, the security of not only our technology, but the physical assets that the city owns and maintains. And, of course, we're also involved in our e-government services that you've heard a little bit about tonight from the other departments, some of that being our community development portal, our own e-employee portal that our employees use for their benefits processing and employee information. And then we also support software throughout the organization. We're a partner, and I call ourselves a partner because we partner with the departments to deploy their solutions, let them take the lead, provide them the tools and the troubleshooting that they need to help support their products, but they really are the administrators of their solutions. We help carry forward the replacements and the ongoing use of those systems, but we really depend on each other to help move technology forward in the organization. So when you heard the chiefs mention technology, Jenny mentioned technology, these departments are leading some of these efforts with IT as a partner. And we do as much as we possibly can do for them, but we want them to do a lot for themselves also. These are some of the systems that we help support. Obviously, these are in some major areas of our operation that we continue to have in-house. Now, as we move forward and replace these systems as they age and they get to the end of their life cycle, we're considering options for other alternatives like hosting with third-party solution providers, maybe not bringing it in-house. Because as we add and change the technology, it's not always possible to keep up with everything that's going on around us in the outside world, so we do depend on others to help us bring projects forward. And I'll mention that a little bit more as we go through some of the efficiencies and some of the budget pressures too. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we also do focus on trying to create knowledge workers within our organization by providing day-to-day help desk support, by providing training not only for our, of course, our own IT staff, but for staff in general throughout the organization. As we implement new solutions, obviously there's always training involved, and it's not only the upfront training that's involved, but it's ongoing training that makes sure we take advantage of the systems that we procure and take advantage of the most that we can out of these systems. We also do provide 24/7, 365-day, around-the-clock support for most systems. Many of our systems are utilized after hours, primarily in areas of public safety, but that's changing as we're doing more and more e-government initiatives. Our residents and businesses are using those systems after hours when they're home and they're enjoying their time at home and can access city systems. So the expectation that those systems are available and up and running increases every year with every system that we implement. We also are involved in regional partnerships. You've heard a little bit of these acronyms earlier and from me in the past, but we continue these relationships with Dakota Communication Center. Obviously, we're part of the public safety upgrade that's occurring next year with our CAD and mobile products as a partner of the DCC, and LOGIS. LOGIS is a technology consortium that we belong to. We're a member of it. LOGIS stands for Local Government Information Systems. We procure some IT services from them. We actually took on some additional services this year that I'll mention in my budget pressures also. We're also part of the county partnership with Criminal Justice Integration or Information Integration Network that provides us police records services, law enforcement, criminal justice technology in general. And we also have several joint powers agreements in place for the utilization of our fiber optics. I mentioned that a little earlier. That's part of the reason why we're cost neutral in our maintenance of our fiber. We have agreements in place with public and private partners. They pay for some of the use of the excess fiber capacity that we're not utilizing and it pays for the ongoing maintenance of that system today. And we hope to keep that up and continue that. It's a value of about $45,000 a year in savings currently and growing. Some of the budget pressures and efficiencies. Obviously, this is a fairly common statement you'll probably hear is the fast pace and changing technology in all operations. It compounds every year. We see the technology, the pace of technology changing and the amount of technology coming out and becoming available for consideration increasing every year. And that poses obviously just a natural challenge to keep up with when should we do something, how should we do something, what kind of resources is it going to take to do that, and how do we keep up our knowledge and our training to bring it forward, those technologies. And then the term you're going to hear more and more about and you're going to read about is the Internet of Things or the Internet of Everything. The idea that anything and everything you buy in the future is going to connect to the Internet in some way, somehow. The devices we're buying today, from the lighting systems to the heating and air conditioning control systems to buildings to your refrigerators at home now can be connected to the Internet. That is having a definite impact on us. And it makes it a little bit more challenging because now instead of dealing with hundreds of devices, we're dealing with thousands of devices potentially in the near future. And that will just continue to grow. And then, of course, training. I mentioned that earlier. And then our hardware software replacement schedules. We have a lot of product in place, and it's like anything else. At some point in time, the life expectancy of that product is either dictated by the vendor who sold it to us, or the vendors that support it, or our uses of it and how much that product can continue to run in our operation. And so we're seeing also the schedules, the timelines between replacements decreasing because of the product, the pace of product changes. And in order to keep up with that, it's requiring us to replace systems maybe in a quicker fashion than we typically had to in the past several years. We're keeping we're trying to keep ahead of it, but we're also pragmatic. We're only going to replace what we absolutely need to replace, and when it makes sense, not because we just want to replace. And then obviously a number of new implementations and projects by other departments that bring in new technologies that may be something that we didn't necessarily plan for in IT, but it's part of a project regardless. A more recent example of that is the Heart of the City deck expansion project. That's increasing what we need to provide in that facility. We're going to be adding additional security cameras to provide the level of security that's needed for the expansion. We're going to be providing some lighting control systems in there for the lighting that's in there. So those types of projects, even though they weren't IT projects, they have some IT component to it. So those have some pressures on us. And then obviously I think one of the things that you're hearing more and more in the news, on the internet, and more things that you see is the security of systems, the hacking, the making sure that we're keeping ahead of things that could potentially put the city systems at risk. Now we're mitigating that through different means by either contracting out help or buying through third-party hosted companies that's allowing us not to have everything in-house. So those components are helping us move things forward, but security is going to become more and more of an issue for us to consider. And we're also starting to see more and more mandates, either by state and federal organizations that are mandating that certain precautions and procedures are in place at the local level to ensure that our access to their systems and our own systems meet their level of standards. And in many cases, we're starting to see required audits on a regular basis to make sure that we comply with that. Well, that requires our resources to go through those audits on a regular basis. So those are some of the pressures that we're starting to see more of. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier the 24/7 nature of e-government services that we're providing after hours. Many of the efficiencies that we're moving into and already are part of were highlighted earlier with some of the other departments, but we're going to continue to look at hosted services for things that we're bringing in, new services as systems age and need to be replaced. We're looking at the alternatives other than having to buy equipment and software to bring in-house. Who can we partner with? Who can we buy services from online that meet our security requirements, that meet our needs in terms of applications and services? And we're going to continue to do that. Some recent examples, there are some recent products that you approved in council agendas. Telestaff, which is a fire resource scheduling and call-out product that we're going to be implementing here in the next few months. That's going to be 100% hosted with a third-party vendor. Our fleet management system, as Steve had indicated earlier, that'll be hosted through Scott County and Carver County. It will not be hosted here. And then we're looking at additional HR tools that will be hosted online for HR onboarding solutions. That means when we hire staff, bringing new staff and new people through our process, but in an automated way. We're looking at doing that through hosted services. We're also, as we transition into Microsoft's new environments of products, we're looking at, we are moving to hosted services for our email system. So we'll no longer host our email system in-house. We'll host that through Microsoft government related services. They have a government cloud service that's for government organizations only. And as we move forward into more Axon devices, on-camera officer devices here in the near future, those are going to continue to be hosted solutions for all the video storage, the video management, the video retention, all the things that we do to manage that video product today. Today they're 100% hosted, but as we move forward, we're going to continue to buy more product and host more product in the cloud. And then virtualization, you've heard me talk about that before, and we do a lot of virtualization today. What that means essentially is that allows us, in the old days, maybe 2 years ago, when we bought a server for, when we bought a server technology, we would buy a server to do one thing. It might run an application, a single application, so we'd have to buy a piece of hardware to run that one application. Well, with today's technology, virtualization of technology, it allows us to consolidate hardware into single pieces of hardware and buy less hardware and put more software and mimic servers as software pieces instead of hardware pieces. So essentially, over the past 5 years, we've been moving in this progression. We've been able to minimize our environment from 100% hardware in the past for every server we had down to about 10% of our environment today is hardware-based. So we're about 90% virtualized today on the server environment, which allows us to buy less hardware, replace less hardware, and focus on just running more efficient products on less hardware. And that's really what virtualization is about. I could talk to you about it all day long, but it's a neat technology that we had to leverage, we needed to leverage to keep up with what was going on around us. And it allows us to focus less on hardware infrastructure and more on projects and software application implementation. And then we are doing additional contracting for projects as a way to mitigate and become more efficient. Obviously, our staffing is maintained at a level that hasn't changed in several years, but in order to move forward on projects, we're hiring out a lot of help. This year we actually engaged Logis, that Logis Technology Consortium that we're a membership of, to provide us more network management services. So we were actually engaging them to manage more of our network, which allows us to focus on other things. It's been a good process. We've seen a lot of great benefit from it. It's similar to what Steve mentioned earlier. They've got experts in areas that we're not experts in, and they can focus on things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. For us on our behalf. And then so far, after 9 months of that service, we can say that it's gone very well, and they've provided a great service in that area. And they focus primarily on the network connectivity of all those facilities I mentioned earlier. So it really allows us to focus on other objects rather than just the network technology connecting our buildings. And our current staffing levels haven't changed. I reported in the last 2 years we're at 7 FTEs. That includes Linda Glor's position as who manages our assets and our towers and our antenna sites. Today our makeup is an IT systems engineer, IT analyst, systems analyst. We did a little bit of reorganizing earlier this spring. We had 2 key positions leave us. One for the private sector for a little more competitive pay job, and another one for another public sector entity. Slowed us down a little bit in the beginning of this year, so we took the opportunity to reorganize. We promoted one position, that was John Sidness, one of our IT specialists, to a lead IT specialist position. He now provides work direction to our other 2 day-to-day operational specialists, and it's been wonderful. We're bringing projects forward efficiently and quickly this year. We're a different organization internally, and we like to think we're providing better services today, too, to our internal staff. And we're a fairly tight-knit group as IT people go, I guess.
You have a bowling team?
Not yet. We're still getting to know each other.
Virtual bowling.
That's right, it's all
Technology. It's that technology bowling.
Our 2015 budget overview, as you can see, we're kind of split in thirds here in terms of our budget. A third of our budget is capital related, a third of our budget is personnel, and about a third of our budget is our daily operational costs and expenditures. We prepare a 5-year capital plan, like all departments do. We also participate in the 15-year planning, although it's a little bit more challenging for technology, but we try to identify, obviously, those spikes in areas where we think we might have some major replacements. Beyond that, we do provide additional services to other facilities that are housed, that we have community groups in too, and I didn't mention that earlier, but some of our indirect customers are community groups that are in some of our facilities, like the BAC, the CVB, the PAC staff, and Burnsville Hockey Club, Burnsville Baseball Club, and some of the other facilities that are utilized after hours. IT provides services to those groups too. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Okay, Dan, and then.
Uh-oh. Bad time. I can understand going in the direction of hosted services. That depends on an internet connection.
Yes.
What redundancies do we have in case, for whatever reason, that connection is disabled?
Fortunately, today we've got multiple redundant connections to our network. We've got, because of our fiber optic network, we're actually connected to the internet with multiple paths of fiber. So we could have a single failure in our fiber and still automatically roll over to another backup connection on fiber. We also enjoy the ability to have, we have a lot of mobile units in service today, so individual workforces within our organization have independent internet connections on their mobile laptops, their mobile tablets, so the chance that our primary connection and our backup connection would go down, we would still have primary services to our key workforce, which in this case would be our public works groups, our police and fire groups, without the access to the core city systems here. And as we go forward with hosted services, we're looking at, we don't necessarily take the approach of everything needs to be hosted as an option. We're taking a hybrid approach. What makes sense? What kind of risk is involved with hosting? And when we talk about risk, we talk about things like accessibility. We talk about security. What kind of data are we hosting out there in the cloud? And we vet that as much as possible with the groups that would be impacted using those services. In the end, I can say we've got about 30 plus hosted applications throughout the organization, and that's continuing to grow on an annual basis. And as of yet, we haven't had major outages that have impacted city operations in those areas. Now, we're pragmatic. You know, those things can still happen, and we try to take as much assurances and precautions as possible going forward. But we feel pretty strongly that we have access to those systems no matter what, because we can provide mobile emergency communications to our staff, even in the event that our primary systems would be inaccessible here at the city in our data center.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
The huge infrastructure you're managing.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps us busy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Marty Dahl, our Communications Coordinator.
Yeah.
Communications.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for allowing me to come and speak to you a little bit about the Communications Department here tonight. As you all know that...
I just wondered, before you go any further, if you would inform the public of any aliases that you go by.
Well, anyone who's watched Burnsville Community Television or the city's YouTube channel, they've probably seen an alter ego who may or may not be a relation of mine or me. So,
And the alter ego's name is?
Sustainability.
Sustainability Man, yeah.
I think you bring that up every time I'm here.
I think it's worthy of, it's notable. I want you to get credit for, like.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm still waiting for the royalty checks.
Marvel Comics hasn't called you
Not
for.
yet. Not yet.
Very creative.
But I digress. So the Communications Department, as you all know, we proactively provide information about city services, initiatives, events to our residents and businesses. As you all know, we want to have an informed and engaged citizenry. We want people to know what's going on in Burnsville. So we try to get that information that helps them be informed and engaged. And we do that through a variety of different methods. Our communications toolbox includes print publications and advertisements. It includes digital communications such as our website and email alerts. It includes our cable access channels, BCTV 14 and 16. It includes social media, including Facebook and Twitter. It includes direct relationships with the media and press releases, digital message boards, just a wide variety of tools in our toolbox that we can use to get that information out to folks. Specifically, some of the things that our department oversees is with print and electronic communications. We do a quarterly newsletter that goes out to our residents and businesses 4 times each year. We do a community guide every 2 years. We assist the staff over at the Ames Center with their season guide and playbills to be able to inform people about what's going on there. We do a recreation brochure twice a year. We do a number of other brochures for individual departments for either their core services or events or initiatives that they have going on. And then, as I mentioned, we do some advertising, print and digital as well. On the electronic side of things, we oversee the website, burnsville.org. One thing I'd also like to bring up today is that we are in the process, and later this week we'll be launching our newly revised internal website, our intranet site, with what Tom was speaking of with Office 365 and the hosted Microsoft Office products. We actually have created that internal website using Office 365 hosted out on the cloud. It will be accessible by staff outside of the city, so they'll be able to get those tools and things that are on the internal site away from the office, which will help them be more efficient. We're very excited about being able to launch that this week, as well as email and text alerts, social media. Graphic design, I'll be speaking a little bit about it in our budget efficiencies, but we have a very talented graphic designer here on staff who allows us to be able to do a lot of these creative print publications, including brochures, marketing materials, advertisements, signs, and maps. We actually work a lot with the Parks and Recreation Department, the Streets Department, to actually design signage and maps for them as well as our website. I mentioned media relations, which includes press releases, media advisories, and then coordination with the media regarding interviews or any media requests. We try to be very proactive with the media and try to get them information out, as well as be reactive anytime they have any questions or concerns, to be able to get them the information that they need. They're a good tool to help us get information out to the public. We also, I mentioned the electronic message boards, one of them being the billboards on I-35W. We do boards on our community television channels. We've got boards here at City Hall that help us provide messages. I mentioned Burnsville Community Television falls underneath the Communications Department. Again, another tool that we use to communicate to our citizenry, which includes our studio partnership with ISD 191, our mobile production truck partnership with the City of Eagan that allows us to do community events and concerts and sporting events. We are able to web stream and broadcast on our channels these city meetings, number of other city programs, community events. We assist and educate residents in public access television, training videos. We do some contract service for other nonprofits. And then we also serve as a liaison for residents who have unresolved cable complaints as part of our cable franchise with currently Comcast. A couple of special projects I wanted to note, just because we'll be talking a little bit more when we get to the budget portion. As you all know, we are in the midst of a cable franchise renewal with Comcast Cable, as well as a review of a potential transfer of ownership to a new cable company, which will, again, take up a lot of time on the communications staff, as well as some funding that will need to be dedicated to consultants and attorney fees as we work through that project. And then the other project is a large council chambers audiovisual upgrade that's been in the capital improvement plan for a number of years that is scheduled for next year, that will help us upgrade some aging equipment, move to a high definition platform, change some of the audio, and improve some of our operating efficiencies. So our budget pressures include aging television equipment and the transition to HD. As I mentioned, that's the project here in the council chambers. We've got a lot of equipment in our control room and our cameras that is aging. It's not capable of producing high definition video. As many of you know, there's some audio issues in this room at times that is due to an aging system, and that's also with our mobile production truck is some aging equipment. Demand for more information more quickly. It seems as fast as you can get information out and as much information as you can get out, there's always a demand for more and faster. So that's something that we're always dealing with, of trying to stay on top of the demand for information. As Mr. Venables mentioned, we utilize a number of e-government and hosted platforms. Our website is hosted, our email alert system is hosted, and those costs continue to rise as well. The ongoing cable franchise negotiations and the future of cable franchising is obviously a budget pressure now and into the future. And then we also have a number of part-time video production staff that work in Burnsville Community Television. That it's actually a good thing. The retention, the challenge in retaining them is a good thing, is that we have almost a 90% plus of our part-time folks are going on to get full-time jobs in the industry, which is good, but it's also challenging for us as there's a lot of that turnover. Some of our efficiencies I mentioned earlier. We have a partnership with District 191 and the City of Eagan on cable-related items, which really helps us keep costs low. Our studio partnership with the school district and our truck partnership with Eagan, so we're not taking on those expenses ourselves. We have begun to broaden our advertising and sponsorship opportunities. We've been slowly expanding some of the advertising in our print recreation programs to help offset printing costs. We've entered into a pilot program with Google for advertising on our website, and we're always exploring ways to bring in other sponsorship dollars. I mentioned our in-house graphic design expertise. We've had an in-house graphic designer for some time, and we've just brought our last piece of communication that we were outsourcing with graphic design in-house, our Burnsville Bulletin, to be able to leverage that expertise rather than spending money outside with graphic design. We continue to negotiate reduced rates in eGov. As I mentioned, those rates are continuing to rise, and we continue to ask them to lower them. So we've had some success with that in the past. We've actually been able to negotiate our email alert system annual rate down quite a bit. So we continue to do that as costs continue to rise. And then we also continue to leverage free tools that don't cost us anything to do, social media or I-35W billboards. We really expanded our presence on social media this last year through a number of very targeted campaigns with the 50th anniversary and virtual ride-alongs, and we've really seen a lot of growth and engagement and interaction in those tools. Our staffing, we have 5 full-time equivalent positions. There are 3 of us in communications and 2 that are full-time Burnsville Community Television employees. So those 2 folks are housed over in the studio at the high school, with 3 of us here at City Hall. And then, as I mentioned, we have a fluctuating group of part-time video production assistants as well. And our 2015 budget overview, as I've mentioned in the past, the communications budget does not come out of the general fund. It is funded through cable franchise fees, and the Burnsville Community Television is funded through public education and government fees that come from the cable company. So we actually bring in enough franchise fees that we are able to transfer $185,000 annually to the general fund. You'll see a larger piece of the pie for the capital improvements for next year than you typically would see from our department, and that's this project that is planned for the council chambers for next year. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Questions? Questions for Marty? Very well done. People are pleased with the number of communication portals that they can access.
Great. That's what we try to do. We try to get it out as
And
much.
for us, it's really what we need our citizens to be able to have is the information they want and to have it quickly, and they can access it readily. So I think what you did with the website also has helped them to navigate that website. I think you made those changes last year.
Yeah, we updated the website, I believe it was 3 years ago now is when it was first updated, but we're constantly refining things and
Yeah,
taking
so people could
feedback.
find it.
Yeah,
Like
so
to
we
track
can-
it at one
yes.
point, they couldn't find it,
Yep.
but now they can track it more easily.
Yeah, we're continually refining the navigation structure and taking feedback from people if things are difficult to find. We actually utilize a number of shortcut URLs to get people directly to specific sites, burnsville.org/fire/police. So we continue to refine that and use those digital tools.
Very well done. Anything else?
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we got
Thank
great
you.
communication going on.
Okay. And next, we have Kelly Stry, our Finance Director. Welcome.
Thank you. We are kind of a behind-the-scenes department in a lot of ways. We have both internal customers that we serve the departments with their information needs, and then we also have external public customers as they are accessing information about their utility bills and that sort of thing, billing for the water and sewer. We kind of can be divided up into time. There's current processing, so accounting, which is processing transactions and making payments and all that current daily work that goes on every day. And then there's forward-looking part of our work in finance, which is budgeting and financing and figuring out how to pay for things and bonding and that sort of thing, projections. And then there's the past-looking, which is reporting. And as we look at how are we doing budget to actual, what are we providing departments on how they've spent their money, and then the annual reporting that we do. So looking at that day-to-day, kind of the traditional accounting kinds of things that we do, we're paying our accounts payable, so the bills. We process over 10,000 invoices a year. And payroll, we're paying our employees, and tracking capital projects. On the money coming inside, we're cash receipts from all different areas, processing those. And accounts receivable, our biggest accounts receivable is our EMS billing that we do, and we do utilize a third-party billing company to do the medical billing for us because it's such a specialized information that needs rules and regulations. They do that, but we do have somebody in-house who oversees that and deals with the calls that come here related to the ambulance billing. And then grants is another big area that has a lot of transactions to process, a lot of information to gather. We set up our policies and procedures so that we're safeguarding the city's assets, and everything that we do in finance is looked up on how are the internal controls around all of that processing, and are we safeguarding the cash and the money that is going through the city. I neglected the bottom there, utility billing, which is a big portion of our work that we do. We have over 17,000 utility billing customers that we're billing monthly, and we are utilizing technology in that area, and that is an area where we've made a lot of efficiencies, and I'm going to touch on some of my efficiencies kind of as I go through here. Utility billing, we've improved credit card processing significantly, and that has been well received, and also is a good time saver in our area too, as people move to more automated payment, and it's what customers have been asking for.
Yeah. That was a really good thing to do once we solved the issues around the security of that
Yes.
function.
Yes. And another area that has seen a lot of growth payment-wise in utility billing is the bank pay, people who utilize their bank to issue their checks directly to us. There's what you might not know behind the scenes is that there are a couple different ways of doing that and accepting those payments. One is it's electronic on the customer's end where they're asking their bank to make the payment, but they're actually just cutting us a check. And that tends to be a really manual process for us. And then there's an automated way of accepting those, so they become electronic transfers and automatically go and credit people's accounts, and is getting the account numbers correct, that so it doesn't require a lot of manual processing. And that is something that we've moved to and has made huge efficiency gains for us in the utility billing area. Also, we've enhanced our lockbox processing. So people who are mailing checks to us, it's actually being mailed to our lockbox, our bank processor, who are experts in processing those things very quickly, have the automated processes to get that information to us and into our system. So that becomes an electronic process for us as well. In accounts payable, we've, over the past few years, moved a lot of check payments to ACH, but we have focused more recently in the past few years on moving towards P-card payments. So that is an efficiency for all of our departments as well as the finance department. When I say P-card, I mean a purchasing card. It's a city credit card that instead of using a traditional vendor invoice processed through accounts payable and a check issued, they have a city credit card that we have controls around, and the certain authorizations of where they can use that card. But it's faster and for the departments to use, really quick processing, and provides a lot of controls for us too, and faster on the finance end of things. So we've really moved about a third of our small dollar purchases, well, a third of our purchases, but they're small dollar purchases, to this faster way of processing. So that's been a big enhancement for us as well. In payroll, we utilize our finance system and our e-timesheets. So where we used to have paper timesheets from employees turned in every other week, we now have an automated process where people are filling out their timesheets online, and it's automatically going through supervisors for approval, electronic approval, and then on to payroll for another electronic approval, and into the payment system. So eliminating a lot of time, and then also data entry errors, as we're not entering that sort of stuff. It's coming over electronically from the original source. And another area that saves us electronically is the e-benefits, which I'm sure Jill will probably mention as well. It saves both HR and payroll. That's the annual benefit enrollment process for employees. It can go online now and select their benefits, and then it automatically loads into our payroll system. On our forward-looking, the budget process, as you all are aware of, takes about 3/4 of the year. We start.
We're always into budgets.
We are.
Kelly.
We laugh that in finance we're kind of always either in next year or last year, but the process really starts in finance in April and May as we're preparing our first projections, and then we come to you in June And as you all know, we've gone through all of these processes over the last month. There's something that happens just about every month, and we're now really coming into the detail as we come up. But our 5-year financial planning has been a big benefit to the city as we look forward. And as Steve mentioned in his presentation as well, you see 5 years, there's really 15 or even more in some areas behind the scenes as we're looking out to make sure that the decisions that are made in this year's budget don't put us in a predicament in the future year's budgets. And so we're anticipating what is coming up. We're also involved with the engineering department on the capital improvement projects, and then the other departments as they're looking at their vehicle replacement and their facilities replacements. Those are all out multiple years. Bond issuance, as we're funding those particular things, we're looking at what, how do we borrow as needed, and how do we do that at the least cost. So we work with our rating agencies, and as you know that we are a AAA rated city, that is the best that the city can be, is AAA rated, so that lowers our interest rate costs on our bonding. Banking and cash management has really expanded in the amount of offerings of services they can provide for us, and also the technology related to that, and fraud prevention. That is a big thing that we're looking at always there. And risk management is another piece that we do. We work with all departments in the city, but providing the general insurance for general liability insurance for the city, and looking at reducing risks and what can we do to lower those costs. And then there's the historical look as financial reporting. And one of the pressures that we have is the additional reporting that's always seeming to be required, and then also as reporting standards change as well. Government Accounting Standards Board, as you know, GASB is coming out with new statements all the time that we have to be on top of and make sure we're reporting consistent with those. We also are providing reports internally to our staff, and we have had our staff in all departments access to the financial system for many, many years. And that has really created a sophisticated user out there in the departments, and with that, they are always looking for more information. And what more, how can we keep adding data to the system, collecting more information faster and better? And we think that's great, because that means that they're making their financial decisions within their departments based on a lot of great information. So they have relevant, current information, and then we also are providing them with help in the analysis of that information. So all of the staff in the finance department, I would say, are power Excel users and can help with more advanced things like pivot tables, and we can do business analytics using our systems, data mining down into the data. I think I've gone over all of these efficiencies as we talked about there. Maybe the last couple it didn't talk so much about, but moving to paperless. All of our invoices in accounts payable are scanned, which means that whenever anybody is looking for an invoice, it's at a touch of a finger touch, and we can send it, email it to whatever department is looking for it. It's very handy. And then cross-training in all areas. Also, all of our staff can cover for other people in other areas. We have 10.6 FTE. We have a few part-time staff included in those in the accounting and the utility billing area. And so in the general fund, and this is before allocations because we do allocate out to the enterprise funds as we are providing services and for those areas as well, but the half of it, more than half, is personnel related, and then insurance is our other big portion that also gets allocated out to the enterprise funds as well. Small amount of current expense. And in the utility funds, we have the direct personnel, which is our 2 utility billing staff that are working directly on customer service. And then current expense would be the utility processing, the billing processing costs. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Kelly?
No, but I just have a comment, and that is, since I've been on council, I have seen the disappearance of paper. I mean, it's absolutely amazing what you've done there. And also just some of the other things that don't affect me directly, but like the P systems, we get the emails on all of that. It's really wonderful. But when you talk about Power, Excel, and pivot tables and data mining, you're almost as mysterious as Mr. Venables back there.
That's great.
But it is, it's heartening to see that even in finance, which normally it's not a tangible thing. It's nothing that you can really see the efficiencies directly, but to know that they're going on. And I guess I just want to make that comment that I have seen it in various ways, like disappearance of paper and things like that. So my compliments to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And also this year, I really appreciate the reporting that you've done and all of the departments, because it gives good information for our citizens to know what all goes on. Because what you have, all of you have done this evening is say to the public, here's what it takes to run an organization to provide the services that keeps our community safe, that keeps the assets of the community maintained and improved. And it just works well, and they don't realize all of what takes place to make this organization run the way it is and to provide the kind of services 24/7, 24/7. So if you take all of that money and what their taxes are and divide it down to a weekly basis, on a 24/7 basis, what that cost is, it's pretty good. Mary.
Well, and just in addition to what the mayor said, occasionally I have gotten, and I would think other council members have gotten, inquiries from people who want more detailed information, who have a special interest or an expertise in a particular area, whether it be public works or IT or finance, and I know that I can, in great confidence, refer them to you. That I don't have to have that fine tuned information. That you have it, and I know that you always satisfy those people that I refer to you. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, well done. And our last presenter, but not the least, who really takes care of everything in terms of our personnel, Jill Hansen, our HR director.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for your time tonight. I know that all of you are very aware of the different functions that Human Resources provides. Tonight I'd like to focus on some of those activities that we've really focused on for 2014 and will have an impact on the 2015 budget. First one, recruitment and selection. In my opinion, this is one of the main functions, the most important to the organization, to hire the best and most qualified employees that fit the culture of the organization. And then the challenge of keeping them for a length of time. We have done a number of different recruitments this year. We had 15 full-time recruitments, 18 internal specialty assignments, mostly police and fire, where it's been very advantageous to have people take different assignments and vary their work a little bit in the police and fire avenues. And then we've hired 160 temporary and seasonal employees as well. We have experienced a little bit more attrition or turnover in the last year. I think we were 5% for 2013, and it's 7% for 2014. I think it's a sign of the economy beginning to come back a little bit. We have lost a few more employees to private sector and other public sector agencies, which it hasn't happened too much the last couple years. And then we usually have, 7, 8 retirements, which we also had. We are able to do the number of recruitments that we have because we are using automation. Our new NeoGov system that we've had a few years now, it's an online job application system that I'll talk a little bit more about on the efficiencies slide. The next category, compensation, I'm not going to touch too much on. We are responsible for that, and again, I just want to remind people that we have a compensation philosophy at the city that the council has endorsed about paying in the middle of an identified market. And again, that has turned out very well for us. It's nice to have a consistent philosophy for union, non-union, all of our employees, and that's been very beneficial to us. Benefit administration has been a very busy time for us this year for both insurance and benefits, and a very positive one, I'm happy to report. We had to conduct an RFP for health and dental insurance every 5 years, which was this year. I'm happy to report that we are staying with Health Partners. We have a 3-year agreement with them, and we are going to see a reduction in our rates for 2015. I don't know if I've ever said that before.
No, you haven't. Wow.
So very good news.
That is good news.
It'll vary a little bit by what plan, but 96% of our employees are on the deductible plans, and so they'll see a 4.7 or a 3.7% decrease. So every little bit helps, and it'll be good news for our employees. In addition to that, we have a rate cap for the second year of 5%, so the rates will not go up more than 5% in 2016, and a 9% rate cap for 2017. And it's very difficult to get 2-year rate caps now. So I think it's basically a result of good claims, for the last year, a solid wellness program that we have, and then also going through an RFP process, you get some competition between vendors, which was advantageous for us. So good news on health and dental. We also did an RFP for our life and LTD, and we have a 3-year contract with a new life and LTD firm, Sun Life. So pretty much in insurance, we're good for 2 to 3 years, and we know what our the outside costs will be. So good news there.
Yes.
Very good.
Very good news. Boy, that is, you've never come in and said that you don't have a rate increase. Usually it's 9 or 12%.
Don't hold me to it every year, but
You didn't call a provider and demand that they lower their rates.
No. The other thing related to benefits and insurance is the Affordable Care Act, health care reform, and we continue to work our way through the maze of health care reform. We are ticking off and feel very confident that we're meeting the requirements, but it is a lot of work in determining who's a full-time employee and tracking hours and things like that. So we will continue to do that into the future. Training and development, the only comment, I just want to let you know we have an annual training program every year. We try and vary it to attract different groups, some supervisory training, some training that would apply to all employees, and but we have a plan every year, and we're working with other cities as well to make that happen. Workers' compensation and safety, this was a big focus for both finance and HR last year in terms of risk management and safety, and we made great progress. We hope to continue that into the new year. We really focused on training that would help prevent those injuries, that each department has certain injuries that they're common to their area. So we worked with the League of Minnesota Cities to try and reduce those injuries. And we had a very good renewal in 2014, so we hope to see that again in the April of 2015. Basically, employment policies, we had to make a number of changes to our personnel policies based on the legislature and some changes that they made in terms of FMLA and parental leave, medical leave, those types of things. Performance evaluations, we are looking at automating our system for performance evaluations, making it easier for supervisors to access the information, to know when the reviews are coming up. So we're right now looking at vendors that will provide those services. And wellness and employee recognition, one of the new things that we're looking at is working with employees on a peer recognition program. All of you attend our recognition program in May, and we are working with an employee committee so that they have more input into what types of recognition and awards they can have for fellow employees. So it's a way for them to take a little more ownership and not have the city dictate the type of awards. So we hope to roll that out on May of 2015. And then support services is also technically under HR, so reception and switchboard, mail processing, deposit, supplies, those types of things. If you remember, we made some personnel changes and changes in responsibility up front last year with the goal of providing a little more assistance to community development and inspections and rental licensing where there's really a lot of traffic and people that need to be helped. So we still have 2 people up front, but we were able to save a half FTE and then put a little more focus on inspections and rental licensing. Just to identify a few of the budget pressures, as you know, the state of Minnesota increased the minimum wage, so there was an increase in August of 2014, on August of 2015, and August of 2016. So there will be 3 years, and then after that it will be based on inflation. So we have a small hit on our budget for 2015, but you'll see a full year of the minimum wage increase in the following 2 years. We mentioned a little bit about staffing and turnover, a little bit higher than in the past. I'm not concerned about it, the 1-year change, but we have to recognize that there is a cost to turnover, and we need to make sure that we're attracting and retaining our best employees. I looked at the retirements that we had in this last year, 7 retirements totaling 192 years of experience. And that's amazing for 7 people.
I was looking at that. When you have all these people with all of that experience and all of that brain trust in this city walking out the door, that's hard.
But it's up to us then to plan for that. The succession planning is very important to try and have people ready to go and hit the ground running to replace those people. So I feel like we do a good job on that. And then a budget pressures, again, the Affordable Care Act. There's costs and implications to that program. Even if you do everything right and don't have any penalties, there are fees and things like that that are supporting the program that will have an impact on our budget. And then lastly, just a couple efficiencies. I mentioned our online job application system. We've had it almost 5 years, and we continue to expand the functions and uses of that system. I just listed a couple, but you know, it's all electronic now. It's all done online, and that has worked great for people. We have never had complaints about that. And so everything is electronic. They get messages right away that we've received their application, whether they qualified for an interview. Everything is electronic. So that reduced postage. We have auto scoring on the applications, so we can automatically score for the minimum qualifications rather than HR and the department supervisor reviewing all of those applications. So based on questions that we ask and their answers, we can screen out people that did not meet minimums. And an example of that is police records position that we did. We got 328 applications. And by having the auto scoring, it reduced it to 138 that actually met the minimum. So that's 190 applications that 2 people did not have to review. So it's a very good system, and you can even take it a step further and screen for desirable qualifications and things like that. So the applicants self-schedule themselves now versus us calling them and setting up interviews. And then it's also very useful to run reports on where people saw the advertisements. So if you do a firefighter recruitment, you'll be able to tell where they saw the advertisement. So when you do a firefighter recruitment in a year, you're not going to waste your advertising dollars on places that they never looked for. So you put your money in the best positions. And then we're also getting into online review, so no more printing out all the applications to review. It's all done online. So it's worked very well. I'm very happy with that system. And then lastly, just training. I think a lot of people talked about the partnerships with training. We're part of the HIP training committee in Dakota County. We rely on cities like St. Louis Park that also have organizational development programs, and we share training as well as with Dakota County. So a lot of training joint efforts. And this is the staffing. Human Resources has 4 full-time positions and then the 1 receptionist up front. And again, that we replaced the 1 FTE with a half-time FTE. And our budget is $0.6 million, all in the general fund, and a majority of it is personnel at 81%. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Jill, I'm glad to see that we continue to focus on training, because one of the things that we've always prided ourselves is that we're a learning organization. And our best and most important asset is the people who work here. And so the more knowledge that we can help them to gain, the better it is.
I agree.
For our organization long term. So I'm glad to see that we continue to partner in with St. Louis in the program that is there, and that we continue to do training so that we can continue to increase the knowledge base and the intellectual capacity of our employees.
And there's so many ways to do it. I mean, BJ talked about online training for his firefighters. We use webinars now rather than driving to a place. You sit at your desk and you do. Most of them are free through our vendors, and you can sit and do a webinar for an hour, and it's just very convenient. So there's a lot of options out there.
Thank you. Anything else for Jill? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so to Heather and our staff, all of the department heads, this was well done. I think it was great information, not just for us to sit through all of this, but for our citizens, for both our residential and also for the business community, because this is on our website, and so they can watch this meeting and all of your presentation at their leisure. So thank you, Heather, and to the staff. Well done. Great information. And as we get into the deep dive, I would like to make sure that we have the PowerPoint, so as we remind ourselves, this is all of what that is paying for. So, but thank you very much. Okay. Anything else? If there's nothing else, no comment?
We have another item on round table.
Oh, on the round table, we have one item that has to do with, Michelle needs us to schedule interviews.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. This is, I hope, a very minor item. We did schedule the Black Dog Watershed Management Commission interviews for November 10th, Monday, at 4:45, and we have 5 applicants, and 2 of those applicants are going to be out of town on that day. Now, both of these applicants are incumbents. They've been on the commission for many years.
Yeah.
And it is at your discretion as to whether or not you would like to waive these interviews or if you would like to reschedule.
The 2 candidates, yes.
I've sat on that Black Dog, so I propose, and I've sat enough times with those incumbents that I propose if they reapply that we waive their.
They've been through the interviewing process a couple of
At least a
times.
couple of times.
I concur, we don't need to re-interview.
Yes, and the 2 is Roger and Tom.
Roger Baldwin
and Tom Harmony.
Yeah.
And we know them so well, and they've done a great job on that watershed commission for us. So, are you willing to waive the interviews for the 2 incumbents?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay?
Great. I will schedule that. Oh.
Okay, so we only have 3 to interview.
That's correct.
Will that change our time?
No, because we come in because we have a council meeting.
Yes, but I mean, we're coming in
It would
at,
save us about.
we're coming in at 4:30.
20 and, between 20 and 30 minutes.
So
So what
maybe we
time are
come
you
in
wanting
at
us to
5?
come in?
We are right now scheduled to come in at 4:30 to do our special meeting to canvass
Oh,
the
that's
election
right.
results
So,
anyway.
yeah, we've
So we
got
would still,
3
you'll have a
meetings
few
back to
extra
back.
minutes with the other candidates instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have,
Just so then
And
leave the
we'll
time the
have a little
same.
extra time probably to eat, and you won't have to eat on the run.
yeah.
Fine, thank you.
So just
So it's still
leave it
4:30.
at 4:30.
Still leave it
So
at
it's going
4:30.
to start at 4:30.
Canvas,
It'll
interview.
take 5 minutes.
I'll
We can
take-
get right in.
We can have the interviews start maybe a few minutes later, give you a little more time if you want some discussion regarding the canvas. And then
And then,
I'll check with the applicants and see when they can get here, how early they can get here.
yeah, and then eat, and then meeting,
Sounds good.
okay? Because
Somewhere
that-
between
we have a council
4:45 and
meeting.
5 o'clock we will start.
Yeah. What's the first
Because-
scheduled interview?
We don't have an exact time.
Oh, no, yeah, okay.
Yeah. We just had to make sure that we're okay with waiving the 2 incumbents.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think, well,
Okay?
I'm fine with leaving the time the way it is. We're
Yeah.
building in a lot of extra time. I just don't want to sit doing nothing. So
No.
I'd like to keep it as tight as possible.
Yeah.
I can check with the applicants, and if we can push the whole evening up a little, I'll come back to
Thank
the
you.
council with a proposed new date,
Okay.
or new
New
start
time.
time.
Start time. Okay? Anything else? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Okay. I'll go to the next one.
Yeah, I'm